Welcome to the channel, everyone. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Whether you're here to learn something new, get inspired, or just relax and enjoy some great content, I'm really glad you're here. On this channel, I'll be sharing exciting stories, useful insights, and valuable tips that I hope will make your day a little better every time you watch. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. All right, let's get started. Imagine living in a city where the sky doesn't set, it powers down. That was life in Dios. Every evening, the atmospheric shield above the glittering towers would bleed from sunset orange into a deep, bruised purple, shot through with veins of electric violet. It was a beautiful, terrifying light show, and down below, nobody dared to look up. They were too busy watching the clocks, counting the seconds until they could lock their doors. This city was a gilded cage, built on a lie so dark it had to be hidden by 1,000,000 dazzling lights. And if you think this is just a story, stick around. You're about to see what happens when one person decides to break the cage open. The government blamed it on cosmic weather, but in the quiet corners of the city, everyone whispered the real name for the terror that came with the dark. They called it the night. And Naira Voss was the one they sent to keep it at bay. Her boots were silent as she moved through the plaza, a shadow carved from obsidian and starlight. Her armor wasn't just something she wore, it was part of her, a living metal that shifted with her every breath. Faint lines of light pulsed along the seams, sleeping for now. She was a night warden, one of the city's elite protectors, tasked with fighting the darkness. As she walked, a mother saw her and quickly pulled her daughter close, hiding the little girl's face from Naira's helmet. A familiar coldness settled in Naira's gut. She was supposed to be a symbol of safety, but all she brought was fear. The government called the wardens a shield, but Naira knew the truth. They were the bars of the cage. And her job was to collect the fear that kept everyone in line. Her helmet display was green across the board, all systems normal. But her gut screamed that something was wrong. The city's heartbeat was off. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before something shatters. High above her, clinging to the ledge of a monstrous drainpipe, Elias Kane tried to steady his breath. He was human, a strange sight in Zeus, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His worn leather jacket, a relic from a forgotten earth, smelled faintly of rain and old books, scents that didn't exist in this sterile city. "Just get the shot, Elias," he muttered to himself, leaning out over the edge. Below him, a secret security bay was opening up. The official records called it a maintenance hatch, but Elias had followed the paper trail for 3 weeks and knew that was a lie. He wasn't interested in maintenance. He was interested in the mysterious crate being loaded into the bay. It was marked with the logo of a medical charity, but the guards holding pulse rifles told a very different story. He raised his camera, a clunky old thing modified to bypass digital sensors, and squeezed the shutter. The soft click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. That's when he saw it, a black blur scaling the wall with impossible speed. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. A hand like a steel vice clamped down on his shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall so hard the air exploded from his lungs. His world shrank to the glowing tip of an energy blade humming an inch from his throat. He could hear the whine of the suit's mechanics and the deadly buzz of the weapon. "State your designation and clearance," a woman's voice, filtered through a machine, said calmly. It was the calm that terrified him the most. "Tourist," he gasped. "Lost tourist. Big fan of the, Gothic architecture." The blade didn't move. "You're carrying unauthorized tech in a restricted zone. That makes you a spy. Spies are dealt with on sight." Whoa, wait," Elias said, slowly raising his hands. "Not a spy. I'm a journalist. Mostly harmless, I swear. Check my pockets. No weapons. Just this very expensive camera and a protein bar that tastes like sadness." The warden tilted her head, and with a hiss of compressed air, her visor retracted. Elias had been expecting a grizzled soldier or a cyborg fanatic. He was not expecting her. Her skin was a pale violet, dusted with tiny markings like scattered stars, and her eyes were the color of liquid silver. She had a sharp, severe beauty that stole the breath from his lungs. Her gaze wasn't hateful, just analytical. She expertly patted him down, finding the camera, the half-eaten bar, and his fake ID. "Elias Kane," she read aloud. "Occupation? Xenological observer." "Sounds way better than nosy reporter," he said, trying for a smile. "And you are?" he asked. "Officer Naira Voss," she replied. Elias grinned, a reckless, lopsided thing. "Nice to meet you, Officer Naira Voss. Am I saying that right? Rhymes with boss?" Naira's deadpan expression didn't even twitch. "It's pronounced Nira," she corrected, her voice flat. "And nothing in your language rhymes with it." "Nira. Got it," he said. "Look, Nira, if you were gonna liquidate me, you'd have done it already. I'm no spy. Spies don't fumble. I'm just a guy chasing a story." With a soft hum, she deactivated the blade and stepped back. "You're reckless, Elias Kane," she said, her voice low. "And in this city, recklessness gets you killed." "I'm chasing a lead," he said, straightening his jacket. "People have been disappearing from the lower levels. The government says they moved away, but their transport records are empty. And tonight I saw a crate being loaded into a drone bay that shouldn't even exist." Naira went perfectly still. She'd seen those same gaps in the official reports, the same discrepancies she'd been ordered to ignore. "You need to stop chasing this," she said quietly. "The night is coming." "I'm not afraid of the dark," Elias shot back. "You should be," she replied, just as a sharp chime sounded inside her helmet. She held up a hand, silencing him. "Report," a cold voice ordered in her ear. It was her commander. "Subject located," Naira said, her eyes locked on Elias. "Human male, non-combatant." "Monitor him," the commander snapped. "If he has sensitive data, remove the complication. The festival is about to begin. No loose ends." A chill ran down Naira's spine. Remove the complication. It was a death sentence, delivered like a coffee order. "Understood," she said, cutting the connection. She looked at Elias, who was watching her with those sharp, intelligent eyes. He knew the conversation hadn't been friendly. "You're free to go," Naira said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "But get off this roof. The Festival of Lights is starting. If security finds you up here again, I won't be the one they send." Elias paused, sensing the shift in her. He gave a slow nod. "Thanks for the save, officer. Maybe I'll see you around." "Don't count on it," she said. As he disappeared down a fire escape, Naira stood frozen, her hand resting on the weapon she'd just been ordered to use. For the first time in 10 years, she had disobeyed an order. And as she looked down at those secret crates, she realized the nosy human was right. Something terrible was being hidden in her city. And now she had to know what it was. The Festival of Lights was the city's desperate, screaming answer to the darkness. The main plaza was a pulsing sea of bodies and light. Glowing lantern drones floated through the air like jellyfish, painting the crowds in shifting colors. Ribbons of holographic music twisted between the buildings, shimmering sound waves that burst into sparks when you touched them. It was beautiful. It was deafening. It was all a lie. Elias moved through the crowd, his head down, trying to blend in with the frantic joy of the aliens around him. He was looking for the next piece of the puzzle, and he had a feeling he wasn't the only one. The party-goers, with their shimmering drinks and too loud laughter, were all pretending the sun hadn't just vanished. But Elias knew better. He glanced at the old-fashioned watch on his wrist, a stubborn piece of earth he refused to give up. His source was late. He was supposed to be meeting a Senate whistleblower by the Royal Transit Bridge, someone with the keys to the whole illegal detention program. Pushing through the glittering crowd, he saw the bridge. a massive clear arch over a river of polished black stone that mirrored the frantic city lights. And there, at the entrance, was Nera. She stood like a sentinel in her sleek armor, visor up, her sharp eyes scanning every face for trouble. Looking for him. Officially, she was just keeping tabs on him. Unofficially, she couldn't shake the knot of worry in her stomach. She saw him by the railing, looking tense, checking that ridiculous watch again. And then, the music hiccuped. Not off, just wrong. The holographic banners above flickered and went a dull gray. The floating lanterns sagged, their anti-gravity engines whining like tired animals. A sudden, deep silence fell over the entire plaza, as if a million voices had been snuffed out at once. Nera's gaze shot upward. The sky, usually a perfect artificial twilight, was rippling. A sound like metal tearing itself apart vibrated through everyone's teeth as the atmospheric shield groaned in protest. And then, every single light went out. The city wasn't just dark, it was gone. The blackness that flooded in wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick, and it moved like a tide of ink, pouring down from the tallest spires and swallowing the streets whole. Screams tore through the air. Nera's suit instantly flipped to thermal vision, but the screen was just a mess of static. This wasn't a power outage. This was an attack. The grid hadn't failed. It had been assassinated. "Get to the shelters!" Nera's amplified voice boomed. "Clear the streets now!" The crowd instantly became a stampede, a panicked wave of bodies trampling each other to reach the bunkers. Nera fought her way against the human tide, her eyes locked on the bridge. "Elias!" she yelled, forgetting all about protocol. She spotted him, pinned against the railing by the panicked mob. He was holding his camera up like a shield, his eyes wide with disbelief, staring at something taking shape in the middle of the bridge. It was a shadow that had weight and presence. It rose up from the floor, a swirling cloud of black particles, like smoke that had decided to become a predator. The thing was vaguely human-shaped, but shifted and twisted with jagged edges. It had no cease, just a gaping hole where all light seemed to die. Then it lunged, but it didn't bite. It passed right through the nearest people. They dropped to the ground without a sound, their bodies convulsing as a flash of blue static drained every ounce of life from them. Elias scrambled back, vaulting over the railing onto a narrow maintenance ledge to escape the chaos. The shadow creature turned its featureless head toward the movement. A piece of it detached, flowing over the railing like thick, black oil. It was hunting him. Nera stopped thinking. She fired her thrusters, a short, powerful burst that shot her over the screaming crowd. She landed on the bridge with a solid thud of metal on metal and drew her glowing energy baton. "Run!" she commanded, sprinting toward him. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He was scrambling down the catwalk, the oily darkness flowing right behind him, dissolving the metal path wherever it touched. Nera reached the edge, vaulted over, and landed between the creature and Elias. She swung her baton, a weapon meant to crack riot shields. It sliced through the shadow with no resistance at all, but the burst of energy made the creature shriek, a horrible sound of grinding glass. The black swarm pulled back, then whipped a tendril of pure darkness at her. It slammed into her chest plate like a wrecking ball made of absolute zero. Her suit's power plummeted by 40% in a single second. The cold was so intense it burned. She gasped and staggered backward. This isn't just an attack, she thought, her mind racing. This is a weapon. She regained her footing and looked down the catwalk. Elias was trapped. The path ended at a sealed service door. He was fumbling with some kind of bypass tool, but his hands were shaking too much. The shadow was reforming, getting bigger as it fed on the city's dying energy. Nera charged. She grabbed the back of Elias's jacket and threw him toward a small, blast-proof alcove built into the bridge's support pillar. "Get in!" she yelled. She shoved him inside and slammed the heavy metal grate shut, engaging the manual lock. It felt terrifyingly flimsy as the shadow creature slammed against it, making the metal hiss and start to corrode. Nera squeezed into the tiny space, pressing Elias back against the wall. It was cramped and smelled like rust and ozone. Tendrils of black smoke were already leaking through the grate, curling toward them. "My projector!" Nera gasped, messing with a device on her gauntlet. "I have a portable shield." She slammed her palm on the activator. It whined, sputtered with a weak yellow spark, and then died. "Damn it," she hissed. "The darkness. It's draining all the power." Elias stared at the grate. The metal was now glowing red as the shadow ate its way through. "So we're going to die in a utility closet," he said, his voice shaking. "That's just a terrible headline." She looked at him and saw the terror plain on his face, that raw, human fear. Her powered gauntlet was dead. She had one move left. It was forbidden, dangerous, and violated every rule she'd ever sworn to uphold as a Night Warden. But she wasn't going to die here. With a desperate, violent yank, she grabbed Elias by the front of his jacket and pulled him off the wall. "Listen to me," she said, her voice crackling, stripped of its usual electronic filter. "If you want to make it through this night, you need to hold me." Elias just blinked, his mind struggling to process. "What?" "Hold me," she ordered. "Skin against my armor. As close as you can get. Now." Elias stared, the creeping darkness just inches away. "That's your master plan?" he yelled. "We're going to hug the monster to death. Are you serious?" Nera slammed her body into his, pinning him against the cold wall. She explained in a frantic rush, her words tumbling out. "My armor, it runs on a biofield. It needs a rhythm to stabilize. My heartbeat isn't enough to power the emergency barrier now that the grid is down. I need a second pulse. I need to create a loop." She grabbed his hands, forcing them around her waist and pressing his palms flat against the neural connectors on her lower back. The joking vanished from Elias's face. He saw the fear in her silver eyes, and it wasn't the fear of dying. It was fear of what she was asking him to do. He tightened his grip, pulling her flush against him until there was no space left between them. The contact was like grabbing a live wire. Elias gasped. It wasn't just the pressure. As his chest pressed against her armor, he felt a jolt go straight through his nervous system, a current humming with a deep, ancient sorrow. He could feel her heartbeat, not in his ears, but thumping inside his own chest, fast, terrified, but unbelievably strong. Nera let out a shaky breath, her helmet resting against his shoulder. She closed her eyes, reached out with her mind, and found the chaotic, panicked rhythm of his human heart. And she forced her own to sync with it. Thump, 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 thump. The two beats locked into one. A sound like 1,000 tiny bells chimed in the small space. A brilliant field of light erupted from the surface of Nera's armor. It wasn't the harsh yellow of a standard-issue shield. It was a pearly, iridescent white that pulsed with every synchronized breath they took. The light expanded, flooding the alcove just as the shadow creature tore through the grate with a roar of static. It lunged for them, hit the iridescent field, and shrieked in agony. The light was burning it, boiling the darkness away into nothing but harmless gray ash. The creature recoiled, unable to break through the living barrier created by two souls pressed together. Inside their circle of light, the world fell silent. Elias could feel Nera trembling against him. The armor that had looked so cold and impenetrable now felt warm, almost like she had a fever. He wasn't just holding a soldier anymore. He was holding a woman who had been alone and cold for a very long time. The armor didn't just share power. It shared feelings. Nera could feel his confusion, his fierce instinct to protect her, and a deep aching loneliness that was a perfect mirror of her own. For 10 years, she'd hidden behind this wall of metal. Now, this stranger, this human, was part of her very being. "Don't let go," she whispered, her voice suddenly small. "I'm not going anywhere," Elias murmured, resting his chin on the top of her helmet. "I've got you, Nera." They stood like that for what felt like hours as the dark night prowled the city outside. But inside their small alcove, the light held strong. The darkness was relentless, always searching for a crack in their defense. To keep the shield stable, they had to move as one. "We have to move," Nera said finally, her voice still quiet. "The air in here won't last forever." But she didn't pull away. She couldn't. The moment they broke contact, the light would die, and the shadows would win. They ducked into the service tunnels, moving in a clumsy, desperate shuffle. Elias kept one arm locked tight around her waist, his other hand clamped on her shoulder for balance. Nera had one hand on her weapon, the other pressed flat against his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of his heart, trying to coax it into a steady beat. It was half an embrace, half a tactical hold. As they moved through the city's forgotten guts, screams echoed from the streets above, horrible, choked-off sounds that made Elias flinch. Every time he flinched, the shimmering shield around them flickered. "Steady," Nera murmured, her voice a low vibration against his ribs. "Stay with me. Just focus on the next step. One foot, then the other." "I'm trying," he whispered back. "It sounds like absolute hell up there." "It is," she confirmed. They navigated a maze of dripping pipes and humming, ancient machinery. The closeness was suffocating, but it was the only thing keeping them alive. Elias could smell the ozone crackling off her suit and, unexpectedly, the faint scent of jasmine from her hair. Nera could smell the sweat and rain clinging to his jacket. They were breathing the same air, sharing the same small pocket of existence. By the time they finally reached the lower drainage outflow, hours had bled away. Elias's muscles were screaming from the constant tension, and Nera was bone-weary, her energy reserves drained from maintaining the shield. They slumped against a dry patch of the tunnel wall, still tangled together as the deep darkness at the tunnel's mouth began to fade. The crushing weight in the air seemed to lift all at once. The sun was rising. The city's artificial aurora blinked back to life, painting the sky in the pale gold of morning. Above them, streetlights buzzed on, as if embarrassed they'd ever been off. Nera felt the energy lattice disengage, the iridescent shield dissolving back into her armor. When she pulled away from him, the loss of contact was so sudden it was painful, like a layer of skin being peeled away. Elias stumbled, thrown off balance without her weight against him. They just stared at each other in the gray dawn light. Nera's face was chalk white, her silver eyes wide and completely unguarded. Elias was a wreck, his jacket torn and his face streaked with grime. High above, the city's public address system chimed, and a soothing, melodic voice echoed down the vents. "Citizens of Kylum, the minor grid fluctuation has been resolved. Power is fully restored. Please return to your daily schedules. We apologize for the inconvenience." "A minor grid fluctuation," Elias repeated, a harsh, disbelieving laugh escaping his throat. "People died. I watched them die." Nera had already activated her helmet's long-range scanner, projecting the feed onto the tunnel wall. It showed the bridge where it had all happened. It was pristine. Cleaning drones were already scrubbing the last scorch marks from the pavement, dissolving the fine gray ash that used to be people. There was no blood, no chaos, not a single sign of what had happened. "They're erasing it," Nera said, her stomach twisting as she watched. "They are deleting every last trace." Elias looked at her, his eyes sharp. "Someone wanted this to happen, Nera. That thing. That shadow. It was hunting. It wasn't random." Nera looked down at her own hands. She thought about the order she'd received. Remove the complication. She thought about how the darkness had fried all her standard gear, but left those lethal shadows completely untouched. It was a test, she realized aloud. Or a purge. "My command," she whispered, the words tasting like poison. "The Night Wardens. We're not protecting the city from the night." She looked up at Elias, the horrifying truth crashing down on her. "We're the ones letting it in." Elias stepped closer, not quite touching her this time, but the air between them crackled with the memory of the shield. "So," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "what do we do now?" Nara looked from the drone footage of the sanitized massacre to the man who had kept her alive by just holding on. She made her choice. "We run," she said. The safe house smelled like ozone and old secrets. It was a forgotten pocket buried deep beneath the foundations of District 9, a concrete box that had once been a rapid response outpost for the night wardens back in the Unification Wars. Now, it was just a tomb filled with dust and silence. Nara Voss moved through the space with the clipped, frantic efficiency of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. She sealed the heavy blast door, spinning the manual lock until the tumblers clicked into place with a sound like a bone snapping. From a pouch on her belt, she took a canister of counter-surveillance foam and sprayed the door's edges, the ventilation grates, and a cracked optical sensor in the ceiling. The foam swelled instantly, hardening into a dull gray seal that would scramble audio signals and block thermal scans. The only light came from the low-power emergency strips along the floor. The walls were covered in faint, silvery lines, old sigils of protection the wardens used before they put all their faith in technology. It felt less like a tactical bunker, and more like a memorial to broken promises. Elias Kane sat on a rusty crate in the middle of the room, just watching her. He looked completely out of place in this cold, military setting. With his scuffed leather jacket and bruised knuckles, his breathing still coming in shallow little gasps. After sealing the room, Nara leaned against the far wall, putting as much space between them as she could. But she was quickly learning that distance was just an idea. Her skin felt too tight. Her armor's sensory input was on overdrive. Even from 10 feet away, she could feel the ghost of Elias's heartbeat against her ribs. The bioelectric lattice didn't just switch off. It left a residue, an echo of connection that had her nervous system humming in sync with his. Without even looking, she knew exactly where he was. She knew he was thirsty. She knew his left shoulder ached from where he'd slammed into the wall. It was invasive. It was terrifying. "You're pacing inside your own head," Elias said suddenly, his voice raspy in the quiet. "I can practically hear the gears grinding." Nara folded her arms, the armor plates making a soft click. "I'm securing the perimeter." "The perimeter is a solid block of concrete." "Nara," Elias said, deliberately mispronouncing her name just to get a reaction. "We're safe. Or as safe as we can be when the government is actively trying to delete us." She looked at him, seeing the brittle shield of humor in his eyes. "Why did you come here, Elias? To this planet?" "I told you," he said. "The story." "Stories don't bleed," she shot back. "People do." Elias shifted on the crate, wincing. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "Speaking of bleeding, what happened back there? In the tunnel? When you connected to me? That wasn't just a jumpstart for my heart, was it?" Nara looked away, her eyes tracing the old sigils on the wall. "It's called the Resonance Protocol." "Sounds fancy," Elias remarked. "It's illegal," she corrected him. Elias cocked an eyebrow. "Illegal? You're the cops? Who makes something illegal for you?" "The Senate," she said, pushing off the wall, unable to be still. "The lattice technology was created for squad cohesion. It lets wardens share PAN, stamina, sensory data. But they found a flaw. If two people's biorhythms sync up too perfectly, the lattice creates a feedback loop. It stops being a tactical tool and becomes a bond." "A bond?" Elias repeated. "Like a marriage? Or a gravity well?" Nara said, her voice sharp. "It creates a permanent neural link. We're bonded. We become attuned. If you get hurt, my vitals will spike. If I feel fear, your adrenaline will surge. The Senate outlawed the protocol 50 years ago. They're afraid of what they can't control. A soldier bonded to someone else values that person more than the state. It makes us unpredictable. It makes us human." Elias let out a long, low whistle. "So basically, we just accidentally engaged in some kind of high-tech soul meld because you didn't want my face eaten by shadows." Nara glared at him. "It is not a soul meld. It was a biological imperative for survival. Don't romanticize it." Elias leaned back, a small grin playing on his lips. "You know, from the outside, your politics look really complicated. But from down here," he continued, "it just sounds like a soap opera with lasers." Nara just stared at him. The sheer absurdity of boiling down the tyrannical, complex, socio-political structure of the Xyloian Empire to a daytime TV drama hit her so hard that a short, sharp sound escaped her throat. It was a laugh, rusty and startled. It surprised her as much as it did him. "There it is," Elias said, his voice soft. "I knew you were in there somewhere." Nara's expression instantly turned to stone, the soldier's mask snapping back into place. "We have work to do. If we stay here, the bond will settle permanently. We need to move." She strode to an equipment locker and pulled out a fresh energy cell for her baton. "We need to find your contact," she said, her voice all business. "If he has proof of this detention program, we can use it for leverage." Elias stood up, his playful mood gone. "The meet was in Sector 12, at the festival grounds. If he wasn't caught in the stampede—" "He'll be there," Nara finished for him. "Or he'll be dead." Sector 12 was a disaster of confetti and shattered glass. The Festival of Lights had ended in a full-blown panic, and the streets were choked with the abandoned remnants of a celebration that had turned into a nightmare. They moved through the shadows, Nara taking the lead with Elias close behind. The city was on a soft lockdown. Drones sliced through the sky above, their searchlights sweeping the streets in lazy hunting arcs. What would you do if the very people sworn to protect you were the monsters hiding in the dark? That's the nightmare Elias found himself in. He and his new, heavily armed bodyguard, Nara, reached the rendezvous point. A quiet little corner tucked behind a hydroponic garden, but it was completely empty. Nara scanned the area with her thermal optics. "Cold," she said. "No one's been here for a while." Crouching low, she spotted a dark smear on the pavement. It wasn't blood. It was a melted puddle of plastic and circuit boards. "Your contact," Nara stated, pointing to the slag. Elias knelt, his heart sinking. He spotted a warped piece of metal in the mess and pulled it free. It was a scorched ID chip. "They erased him," Elias whispered. Nara looked up. The scorch mark on the wall was a perfect circle. "Too clean, too hot. This wasn't some random attack," she said. "The shadows tear you apart. They don't incinerate you. They leave cold spots," she continued. "This is plasma scarring. We're talking military-grade hardware." She stood, her eyes sweeping the alley. "And check out the footprints." Elias squinted. "What footprints?" "Exactly," Nara said. "The ground is covered in dust from all the chaos, but this little spot? It's been swept clean. Someone sanitized the scene. They wanted it to look like he just vanished, but they got sloppy." She pointed to a glint of metal pressed into a soft pipe near the ground. It was a pin, a golden sod with an eye in the middle. "The Senate insignia," Elias breathed. "It's a warning," Nara corrected him. "For anyone who comes looking." Elias's jaw tightened as he stood up. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick fold of papers he'd been guarding with his life. "I didn't have all the pieces," he said, his voice grim. "That's why I needed him. But I have this." Nara took the documents. They were old-school paper shipping manifests, the kind you can't just delete from a server. She ran her finger down the columns. "Okay, Varen Saul, a senior senator, cargo listed as Class A medical supplies." "Class A is just bandages and basic med packs," Nara said, confused. "Keep reading," Elias urged. "Look at the weight and the power requirements." Nara's eyes narrowed. The power draw for these crates was enormous. And the weight. "These aren't bandages," she realized aloud. They're heavy-duty containment units. Detention tech, Elias confirmed. Cages, but not for people. Nara flipped the page. At the bottom, in the fine print, was a project codename, Project Eclipse Latch. All the color drained from Nara's face. She'd heard whispers about it in the barracks, hushed rumors from old vets who'd seen too much. Eclipse Latch, she murmured. The conspiracy theory that the night events aren't a natural disaster, that they're manufactured. Engines of war designed to reset the population, Nara finished, her voice hollow. The Senate thinks fear is the only thing holding the empire together. When things get too peaceful, people start wanting independence. So they created the night, Elias said, the horrible truth settling over them. They harvest that dark energy, store it, and unleash it whenever there's too much unrest. Weaponized nightmares, Nara breathed, and Veyron Saul is the architect. A soft click echoed from the mouth of the alley. Nara spun, instantly shoving Elias behind her as 3 figures blocked the entrance. They were tall and slender, dressed in flowing white coats. Their faces were hidden behind smooth porcelain masks, painted with serene golden smiles. Assassins, Nara hissed. The Senate's cleanup crew. The one in the center tilted its head. Officer Voss, a filtered voice said. You've wandered quite far from your patrol route, and it seems you've picked up a pest. We're leaving, Nara said, her hand dropping to the baton on her hip. The assassin let out an amplified sigh. Regrettable. Then all 3 moved in a blur. Nara wasn't a brawler. She moved like a dancer. She ducked under a kick that whistled past her ear and slammed her baton into the first attacker's knee. The joint shattered with a sickening crunch, but the assassin didn't even scream. It just folded into a combat roll. Elias, get back! Nara yelled, blocking a vibrating blade with her armored forearm. I'm trying, he shouted back, as one of the assassins leaped off a wall and landed right in front of him. The porcelain smile loomed over him as the assassin raised a serrated knife. Elias scrambled backward, tripping over a crate. His hand flailed and landed on a heavy tool he'd grabbed from the safe house, a magnetic cargo lifter. He had no idea how to fight with it. He just squeezed the trigger in a panic. The device roared to life with a violent hum. A powerful magnetic field erupted, ripping the knife right out of the assassin's hand. It flew through the air and slammed onto the head of the tool with a loud clank. The assassin paused, staring at its empty hand. Elias looked from the tool to the assassin. I meant to do that. But the magnetic field didn't stop there. It latched onto the assassin's metal belt buckle. With a yelp, the killer was yanked forward, slamming waist first into the tool. Elias just swung the whole contraption, heavy tool and attached assassin, sideways, knocking the killer into a pile of trash bins. Nara dispatched the other 2 with a series of brutal, precise strikes that cracked their masks and left them groaning on the ground. She grabbed Elias's arm. Move! More are coming! They sprinted out of the alley and into the chaos of the vertical market district. It was a dizzying canyon of commerce, with shops stacked 50 levels high, all connected by anti-grav pods and floating walkways. They leaped onto a cargo pod that was heading up. Higher! Nara ordered. Nara, we have to reach the upper transit lines. Below them, more white-coated figures were already swarming the lower levels. Red laser fire sizzled past their pod, scorching the hull. Suddenly, the pod jerked as the anti-gravity drive sputtered. The assassins were hacking the grid. We have to jump! Elias yelled, pointing to a walkway about 10 feet away and 2 levels up. Nara didn't hesitate. She grabbed him tight. Jump! They launched themselves into the open air. For one heart-stopping second, they were weightless, suspended over an endless drop. They crashed onto the walkway, rolling to absorb the impact, and scrambled back to their feet, disappearing into the labyrinth of market stalls. The market was quickly emptying as locals fled from the sound of laser fire. Nara skidded to a stop. Up ahead, the walkway ended. A whole section had been cordoned off, and the floor was rippling with a strange, oily blackness. "A shadow zone," Nara said, out of breath. "They're flushing the sewers with dark matter runoff to cut us off." "We can't go back," Elias said, glancing over his shoulder at the approaching white coats. "Then we go through it," Nara said, her jaw set. Elias stared at the writhing darkness. It looked just like the stuff that had attacked him on the bridge, only slower. "It'll kill us." "Not if we shield," Nara replied, turning to him. Her eyes were wide, her pupils dilated. She was terrified, not of the shadows, but of what they had to do next. "Do it," Elias said. He stepped toward her, and this time, there was no hesitation. He wrapped his arms around her armored waist as she gripped the lapels of his jacket. They pulled each other close, and the invisible lattice of energy slammed into place between them. The sensation was 10 times stronger than before. This time, they weren't just scared. They were exhausted, angry, and they understood each other. Nara gasped as she felt Elias's stubbornness, his sharp fear, and underneath it all, a fierce, burning admiration for her. Elias felt the cold steel of her discipline and the molten core of desire she kept locked away. An iridescent shield flared to life around them, humming with a perfect, harmonious chord. They stepped into the shadow zone together. The darkness hissed and boiled, clawing at their boots, but their light pushed it back. They moved in perfect sync, hip to hip, their breaths falling into the same rhythm. Inhale, step, exhale, step. The intimacy was overwhelming. It was more than just being close. It felt like their senses were merging. Elias could feel the air on her skin. Nara could taste the faint trace of blood where he'd bitten his lip. They burst out the other side into a clean service corridor, but they didn't let go. They stood there, chest to chest, as the shield slowly faded, leaving a crackle of static in the air between them. Elias's hands were still on her waist. Nara's were on his chest. She looked up at him, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. "You have to stop," she whispered. "Stop what?" Elias asked, his voice rough. "Wanting," she said. "The lattice. It feeds on intent. The more you want, the louder our connection gets. They can track us by the intensity of our bond. On the energy spectrum, you're screaming right now." Elias didn't pull away. He looked at the violet markings on her skin, at the deep sadness in her silver eyes that he desperately wanted to understand. "Do you ever get to choose?" he asked softly. "What you want?" Nara opened her mouth to recite the code, to tell him that a night warden wants nothing but order, but the words wouldn't come. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything they couldn't say. Finally, she pulled away, and the loss of contact felt like a physical ache in her chest. "This way," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "I know someone who can hide us." The archive wasn't a library. It was more like a hoarder's paradise, crammed into a decommissioned sanitation hub. The room was packed from floor to ceiling with data crystals, old hard drives, and actual paper books. It smelled of stale coffee and overheating servers. Kiri was practically fused to her command center, a 4-armed Tarlaxian with copper skin, swimming in a sea of glowing monitors. With a headset over one set of ears and fingers flying across 2 keyboards, she didn't even bother to look back. "Well, well," Kiri chirped. "Look what the stasis cat dragged in." A pause. "And it brought a stray." Naira stepped out of the shadows and into the light. "Hello, Kiri." Kiri's chair whipped around, her 4 eyes blinking one after the other. "Naira Voss, the golden girl of the guard. Wow, you look like hell. Your armor's busted, your vitals are all over the place." Kiri took a theatrical sniff of the air, her gaze flicking to Elias and then locking back onto Naira. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Oh, this is just priceless. You've got yourself a human problem. He's not a problem, Naira said, her voice tight. He's a witness. Honey, he's a walking soul bond, Kiri cackled. I can practically see your neural signatures tangled up from here. You two are lit up like a downtown noodle sign. Elias stepped forward. Nice to meet you too. I'm Elias. I know, Kiri said, tapping a key without looking. Elias Kane, reporter, professional pain in the neck, and currently the most wanted man in this entire sector. So what's the favor? Can you help us? Naira asked. Kiri sighed dramatically and spun back to her screens. Only because you pulled my butt out of that fire on the Mars colony. Fine, give me the files. Elias slid the data chip across the desk. Kiri snatched it and plugged it in. Her fingers danced across the holographic display. Let's see. Boring, standard corruption, embezzlement. Ooh, hello. She froze. What is it? Naira pressed. Kiri brought up a timeline, a graph showing the city's power grid behavior for the last 5 years. These blackouts, Kiri said, tracing a pattern. They're not random. Look at the timing, Elias said, leaning in. Every 42 days, like clockwork, except for the last one. That was moved up. It was scheduled. And check out the authorization stamp, Kiri said, isolating a sliver of code. It's wrapped in a nasty encryption, but I know this syntax anywhere. This order didn't come from the Weather Service. It came from the Royal Security Council. Rune, Naira whispered. Your commander. He's the one signing off on the darkness, Kiri confirmed. But that's not even the worst of it. She tapped another key, and a list of names cascaded down the screen. Project Eclipse has a little subfolder, Asset Disposal. Naira's name was third from the top. Naira Voss. Designation: Bond Risk. Status: Pending termination. Naira just stared. The words were so cold, so clinical. They knew, she breathed, even before tonight. You used the deep network once before, didn't you? Kiri asked softly, all the teasing gone from her voice. 5 years ago. To save that kid during the district floods. Naira nodded numbly. They flagged you then, Kiri said. They've just been waiting for a reason. You're a glitch in their perfect machine, Naira. A weapon that developed a conscience. A hand gently touched her shoulder. It was Elias. We have to go. No, Naira said, her voice shaking. I have to turn myself in. If I surrender, maybe I can testify. Expose Rune before. They won't let you get a single word out, Elias cut in, his tone firm. They'll stick you in a dark cell and tell the world you died of shame. Then what are we supposed to do? Naira shot back, whirling to face him. We have proof, but who's going to listen? The Senate owns the news. They own the courts. We don't need a court, Elias said, a fire lighting in his eyes. We need a stage. He pointed at the screen. When's the next blackout scheduled? Kiri's fingers flew. Originally, it was 3 weeks from now, but with the new timeline. Her eyes widened in horror. Tonight, she whispered. It's tonight, in less than 4 hours. Where? Naira demanded. The target coordinates are the upper spire, the Senate Gala. Elias looked at Naira, his face grim. They're attacking their own party. No, Naira realized with a sickening lurch. The Gala is inside the solarium dome. It's got its own shields. The blackout will hit the district around the spire. The rich and powerful will be sipping champagne behind unbreakable glass, while their servants and security staff outside are completely wiped out. It's a demonstration, Kiri said grimly. A show of force. Look how we protect you. Elias's expression hardened into pure determination. We're going to that party, he said. Naira stared at him like he'd lost his mind. We're fugitives. We can't just walk into the Senate Gala. We're not walking in, Elias said. We're crashing it. We're going to find the master control for Project Eclipse. It has to be there for them to do a live demo. And we're going to take it. And then what? Naira asked, her heart pounding. And then, Elias said, we're going to broadcast the truth on every single screen in this city. We're going to show everyone exactly who has their finger on the trigger. Naira glanced at the spire's schematic. It was a suicide run. The security would be a fortress. The risk was absolute. But when she looked at Elias, she felt that dangerous, forbidden spark ignite in her chest again. She looked at Kiri. "Can you get us inside?" Kiri cracked all 8 of her knuckles. 8. "I can get you outfits, and I can loop the security cameras for exactly 10 minutes. After that, you're ghosts." Naira turned back to Elias. "If we do this, there's no turning back. We burn everything down behind us." Elias gave her a smile that was both terrifying and thrilling. "Good," he said. "I never liked the dark anyway." The solarium dome perched on the capital's tallest spire like a crown made of diamonds and arrogance. It was an impossible bubble of glass, offering a 360-degree view of the city below, a city that was unknowingly counting down its final hours of light. Inside, the Senate Gala was an explosion of wealth and power. As Naira Voss stepped into the main ballroom for the first time in her life, she felt completely exposed. She wasn't protected by the familiar, heavy shell of her warden armor. Instead, Kiri's contacts had dressed her in a gown of liquid starlight that clung to her like a second skin. It was a deep midnight blue, glittering with tiny, shifting constellations, with a high neck that left her entire back bare, revealing the violet patterns on her skin. She felt naked, a target. Beside her, Elias Kane fidgeted with the collar of his borrowed tuxedo, a stiff, formal garment made of shimmering silk. A tiny translation node was stuck to his throat, humming softly. "Stop messing with it," Naira murmured, barely moving her lips. "You look fine." "I feel like a prize poodle," Elias muttered back, forcing a smile at a passing official. "And I'm pretty sure these shoes are plotting to amputate my feet. Is it a rule that fancy clothes have to be painful?" "It's a universal law," Naira replied. "Now focus. Kiri's camera loop starts now. We have 10 minutes to get near the royal dais and find the entrance to the control vault." They melted into the glittering crowd. The room was a who's who of the empire's corrupt elite. Senators in decadent robes, decorated military chiefs, and corporate tycoons who bought and sold entire worlds. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices and cloyingly expensive perfume. Elias, doing his best to look like he belonged, snagged a drink from a floating service tray. He gave the server a polite nod. "Thank you, my good man," Elias said cheerfully. The server, which was a compact cleaning drone, beeped an error message and started spinning in circles. Naira grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him away as a few people glanced over. "That was a garbage disposal unit," she hissed. "It was wearing a little bow tie," Elias whispered back, defensively. "Why would you put a bow tie on a trash can?" "To be festive," Naira said through gritted teeth. "Now stop talking to the appliances. Just try to look handsome and vacant. It's working for everyone else here." They made their way through the sea of predators, moving deeper into the room. Naira's eyes scanned the faces, landing on Senator Veyron Saul, who was holding court near the center of the ballroom. He was laughing, a sound that grated on Naira's soul. He seemed incredibly calm for a man who was about to order a citywide slaughter in less than an hour. Past him, on a raised platform guarded by a shimmering force field, sat Princess Salith. The heir to the empire looked less like a ruler and more like a beautifully decorated hostage. She was weighed down by ceremonial gold, her face a perfect mask of white ceremonial paint. To anyone else, she looked the part of a serene leader. But Naira saw the truth. She saw the way the princess's knuckles were white as she gripped her own hands in her lap. She saw the tiny, almost invisible tremors in her jaw. The princess wasn't in charge. She was enduring. "Look at her hands," Naira whispered to Elias. Elias glanced over while taking a sip from a bubbly blue drink. She looks overjoyed. She's sending a signal, Naira said, subtly tapping her own index finger against her thumb. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. That's an old royal distress call they teach in the nursery. She's trapped. Elias's whole demeanor changed. So the princess isn't the one driving this thing. She's just the hood ornament. Which means we can use her, Naira said. If she's being forced, she might have the access codes we need, but we'll never get past her security detail. 2 colossal Praetorian guards flanked the platform, their energy pikes crackling with deadly power. Create a diversion, Naira ordered. A social one. And don't blow anything up. Elias sighed and put his drink down. Social diversions. My absolute specialty. He straightened his jacket, plastered on a charming smile, and waded into the crowd, making a beeline for a group of powerful diplomats. Naira watched him go, melting back into the shadows of a massive pillar to see what he would do. Elias didn't even wait for a break in the conversation. He walked right up to a tall, bird-like ambassador who was talking down to a shorter, reptilian-looking senator. "Ambassador," Elias boomed, his translator cranking his voice to a pitch-perfect, confident baritone. "I have to say, your feathers are absolutely stunning tonight. They remind me of the sun setting over the methane lakes on Titan." The ambassador just blinked, his plumage bristling in confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" Elias leaned in closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "And Senator, about that trade dispute? I just want you to know that the Outer Rim Culinary Union is 100% behind you on those spice tariffs." He was spinning a web of complete and utter nonsense, but with the confidence of a king. He touched the ambassador's arm, a shocking breach of protocol that made the guests around them gasp, then immediately launched into a terrible joke about warp drives that had no punchline, but he laughed at it like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. In moments, the diplomats were confused, offended, and completely fixated on him. Every security guard's head turned. The hulking Taurian guards by the dais shifted their focus to the loud, bizarre human holding court in the middle of the room. Nera watched him, her hand resting on the hidden seam of her gown, right where a small, flat blade was tucked away. His recklessness should have annoyed her. Instead, she felt a strange, tight feeling in her chest. He was charming. He was ridiculously brave. He was walking a tightrope over a pit of snakes just to buy her a few precious minutes. Just then, a female senator with skin like polished gemstones glided up to Elias, placing a hand on his chest, her fascination with the exotic human obvious. Elias didn't flinch. He just smiled at her, tilting his head in a way Nera knew all too well. It was the exact same disarming look he gave her. A sharp hot spike of jealousy pierced right through Nera's years of training. It was illogical, it was unprofessional, and it was, without a doubt, the bond between them pouring gasoline on her emotions. Beneath her skin, the lattice flared silently, reacting to the surge of possessiveness. She clenched her jaw, shoving the feeling back down. "Focus, Voss." With every eye in the room glued to Elias's chaotic performance, Nera slipped past the velvet rope. She moved with the silent grace of a shadow, sliding behind the massive tapestry that hung behind the throne. There it was, the access panel, cleverly disguised as a piece of decorative inlay. From her hair, she pulled what looked like an ornate pin. Kyr's custom decryption tool. She jammed it into the hidden slot. The panel hissed open. Access granted. She sent Elias the signal with a single, subtle tap on her earpiece. Mid-sentence about the superiority of Earth coffee, Elias suddenly clutched his stomach. "Oh my," he announced to the room. "The spice tariffs. I think they're disagreeing with me. I must get some air." He gracefully untangled himself from the baffled senator's grasp and stumbled toward a side exit, disappearing behind the heavy velvet curtains where Nera was waiting. The second the curtain fell, the party's roar faded to a dull hum. They were in a narrow service corridor, lit only by dim blue light strips. Elias sagged against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. "I'm pretty sure I just accidentally proposed to a mining conglomerate." You looked like you were having fun, Nara said, her voice much sharper than she meant it to be. Elias glanced at her, surprised by her tone. I was working. That woman had hands like ice tongs. Nara turned her back to him, starting to key the sequence into the hidden door. You're a very convincing liar. Elias moved closer. Through the bond, he could feel her mood like a wave of heat, the prickly sting of her annoyance, but underneath it, something softer, more fragile. He reached out, his hand hovering just above her waist without actually touching her. Hey, Nara. Look at me. Nara froze, her fingers hovering over the keypad. She slowly turned her head. I wasn't playing around out there, Elias said softly. That was just noise. This, he gestured to the small, dark space separating them. This is the only thing that's real right now. And I'm not playing the hero. I'm picking a side. I'm picking you. Nara just stared at him. The bond between them hummed, a low, resonant frequency she could feel in her teeth. His sincerity washed over her like a warm wave, breaking down her defenses. She took a step toward him. He closed the remaining distance. They were standing barely an inch apart now. Nara's hands came up to his waist to steady herself. Elias's hands rose to cup her face, his thumbs gently tracing her cheekbones. They didn't kiss. They didn't have to. The air between them crackled with so much energy, it felt like a storm was about to break. Nara's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes flicked down to his lips, then back up to his eyes. The desire was a physical weight in her chest, but buried beneath it was fear. Not fear of the mission, but fear of this, of being seen, of being known this completely. We have to go, she whispered, the words trembling. Elias rested his forehead against hers for a single, fleeting second. His skin was warm against hers. I know, he whispered back. He pulled away, and the loss of contact felt like a physical blow to them both. Nara took a sharp breath, centered herself, and pressed the final key. The wall slid open. They stepped out of the corridor and into the darkness beneath the gala. The control vault wasn't a room. It was a massive cavern carved from the building's foundations. The air was freezing, supercooled to prevent the colossal servers from melting down, and in the center of the cavern floated the darkness engine. It was a terrifying machine, a spinning gyroscope of black metal suspended in a magnetic field. Trapped inside it was a singularity of pure night, a literal hole in the fabric of reality. It bled shadows that dripped onto the floor and scurried away like insects. The entire floor of the vault was a moat of this crawling, living darkness. Nara stopped them at the edge of the platform. We can't walk on that. It will strip the flesh from our bones. Elias stared at the swirling shadows, which seemed to undulate and reach toward the light from the doorway. We've done this before, Elias said. Nara shook her head. Not like this. That was a defensive pulse. This requires full immersion. We have to walk through it. We need a complete synchronization. She turned to face him, the fear back in her eyes, sharp and clear. If we do this, Elias, she said, her voice low, the bond will deepen. It might not fade when we disconnect. You could carry an echo of me inside your head. Forever. Elias looked from the horrifying engine to Nara's face. He took her hand. Good, he said. I have a terrible memory. I could use the backup. Nara didn't smile, but the tension in her eyes softened. She stepped into his arms. This time, she didn't just press against him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling his face down to hers. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her just enough so that they were perfectly aligned, chest to chest. Hold on to me, she commanded. Elias held her tight. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, focused on the beat of his own heart, slowing it, steadying it, offering it to her like a lifeline. Thump, 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 thump. Nara caught the rhythm and wove her own energy into it. The lattice bloomed. It wasn't a flash this time. It was a sunrise, A sphere of brilliant, white-gold light erupted from their joined bodies, expanding in a solid, silent wave. The crawling shadows on the floor hissed and vaporized, burned away by the pure intensity of their connection. They stepped off the platform together. They walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and they were the light. Elias kept his eyes shut, trusting Nera completely to guide their steps. He could feel her muscles move as if they were his own. He felt the sharp clarity of her tactical mind layered over his own thoughts. He felt her deep love for her city, her burning hatred for its corruption, and her terrifying, overwhelming need for him. They reached the central console. Nera kept one arm locked around Elias, maintaining contact while her free hand flew across the terminal. The light shield around them flickered but held strong. She slid the data key into the port. "Accessing Eclipse Latchmaster Protocol," she said, her voice sounding layered and strange, echoing with the power flowing through them. The screen flashed green. Authorization accepted. She grabbed the master cipher, a physical drive that looked like a cylinder of polished obsidian. "Got it," she said. Instantly, the entire room flooded with red light. Sirens blared, a physical wall of sound that shattered the quiet intimacy of their bond. Massive blast doors slammed shut, sealing every exit. They were trapped. The main monitor above the console flickered on. A face appeared. It was Commander Rune. He was sitting in a comfortable control room, looking utterly bored. He wasn't panicking. He was taking notes. "Excellent!" Rune's voice boomed through the vault's speakers, calm and detached. "The output readings are completely off the charts. I told the Senate the human variable showed promise. But this is exceptional." Nera stared up at the screen, her arms still clamped around Elias. "You knew?" "Of course I knew, Voss," Rune said. "You're a night warden. You don't take a breath without me knowing the oxygen count. I let you run. I let you find the human. I needed to test the absolute limits of the lattice with an emotional catalyst. Fear is a decent fuel, but love is a nuclear reactor." He leaned forward, his face filling the massive screen. "You've just proven the concept. The darkness engine can be stabilized by a bonded pair. We can use this to create a permanent shield for the city, controlled by bonded wardens. You have just handed us the key to eternal martial law." Nera felt a wave of nausea. She thought she was fighting the system. She was nothing more than a lab rat. "Now," Rune said, "complete the test." A panel slid open in the wall beside them. A single pulse pistol glided out on a tray. "Eliminate the catalyst," Rune ordered. "Kill the human." Nera froze. "If you do," Rune continued, his voice devoid of all emotion, "your file is wiped clean. You're reinstated with full honors. You will become the commander of the new Night Warden Corps. You will survive." Nera looked at the gun. Then she looked at Elias. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking only at her. He didn't pull away. He didn't say a word. "Imagine being punished for an act of kindness. That's what my commanders did to me 5 years ago. My crime? I held a terrified little boy during a shadow attack, shielding him with my own energy until sunrise. They called it unregulated intimacy and threw me in solitary for 30 days. Now, that same commander was ordering me to execute an innocent reporter just because our biofields had connected for a split second. Do you think I followed the order? You're not going to believe what I did instead, so stick with me." Rune, my commander, smiled from the monitor, confident his good little soldier would obey. I raised the gun, its cold metal a familiar weight in my hands. I aimed it right at Elias's heart, but I wasn't a soldier anymore. In one swift motion, I spun around and fired, not at Elias, but at the massive engine behind me. The bolt slammed into the cooling vent, and the machine screamed as its magnetic field collapsed. "I am a Night Warden!" I yelled over the noise, "and I am done with the dark!" I fired again, shattering the vault's lockdown system. Then I jammed a stolen master cipher into the main console and screamed one word: upload! The system fought back, but it was too late. A flood of secret data began streaming to every screen in the grand ballroom upstairs. The beautiful holographic decorations fizzled out, replaced by raw lines of code revealing the truth of Project Eclipse. Then came the audio files, secret recordings of the powerful Senator Veyron Saul himself, ordering the very blackouts that had terrorized the city. In the vault, the engine shrieked, and Rune's face on the monitor twisted with pure rage. "Kill them!" he roared. "Kill them all!" The vault doors started to grind open, not because he willed it, but because the entire building was losing power. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Elias's hand. We bolted out of the vault and down the service corridor, the sounds of chaos and panic thundering through the ceiling above us. We burst through a curtain and into the ballroom, and it was total bedlam. The party was over. Senators were scrambling over overturned tables, and guards were trying to secure exits that wouldn't open. In the center of the room, Princess Salith's throne was empty. She was gone. Suddenly, my earpiece crackled to life. It was Kiri, our tech support. "Nera, get out! The night is here!" "What?" I yelled, dodging a panicked server. "It's not scheduled!" "They moved it up!" Kiri screamed. "And they rerouted the shields to protect the Senate floor below. The ballroom is completely exposed." I looked up at the giant glass dome. The invisible energy shield that protected us flickered and died. And then, the sky fell in. The darkness didn't creep in this time. It crashed down like a tidal wave, passing right through the glass. The lights went out instantly, and the only thing you could see were the muzzle flashes from the guards' rifles. The screams were horrifying. Shadow creatures like spiders made of pure smoke dropped from the ceiling onto the terrified guests. I saw Senator Veyron, the man behind it all, screaming as a shadow wrapped around his legs and dragged him into nothingness. "Elias!" I spun around and saw him just 5 feet away, desperately fending off a creature with a silver serving tray. It was useless. The darkness was literally eating the metal. I had no weapon that could stop them. I only had one thing. "Hold me!" I screamed. "Do not let go!" I slammed into him, and we tumbled to the floor together, rolling under a heavy banquet table. He wrapped his arms and legs around me, holding on for dear life. I buried my face in his shoulder, and our bond, the connection they called a crime, flared to life. In the pitch-black hell of the ballroom, we became a blazing star. The shadows clawed at the edges of our light, their cold malice trying to find a way in. But our connection was too strong, fueled by defiance and the terrifying choice we'd just made. "We have to move," I gasped. "The emergency chute, the one for waste disposal." Elias let out a hysterical laugh. "The trash chute? Seriously? Go!" We scrambled out, moving as one glowing beacon. The shadows recoiled from our light. We ran through the screaming chaos, yelling for people to follow us, to get inside our shield of light. But the panic was too intense. We reached a service alcove and found the chute, a black hole leading down into the city's guts. I took one last look back at the ballroom. It was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of black. "Jump!" I yelled, and we threw ourselves in, plummeting into the darkness. We held on to each other with bruising force as we slid down the metal tube at breakneck speed, the wind roaring in our ears. We hit the water below with a massive splash. It was an underground river, the waste outflow from the upper city, and it was freezing. We surfaced, gasping for air, the current sweeping us deep into the lower districts. As we got further from the danger, our shared light faded, but the warmth of our bond remained. We finally washed up on a concrete bank miles away, shivering and coughing up water. Elias just lay there, staring at the tunnel ceiling, making sure he was still in one piece. I sat up, wringing the filthy water from my starlight dress. The beautiful fabric was torn and ruined. I looked small, fragile, but I felt unbreakable. Elias looked over at me, his eyes wide in the gloom. "You okay?" he wheezed. I didn't answer with words. I just reached out and took his hand. Our bond hummed between us, no longer a temporary shield, but a permanent, open line connecting us. "We just started a war," I whispered. Elias squeezed my hand back, a small smile on his face. "Well," he said, "it's about time." The lower district was a maze of scrapyards and forgotten neon temples, a place where the glittering city above sent its trash to die. We found shelter in the shell of a rusted-out turbine. I was trying to rig a stolen medical scanner into a biomonitor, my hands steady, but my jaw tight with tension. Elias stood nearby, leaning against a pile of old droid parts. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was filled with the weight of what we'd done, of the illegal, resonant bond that was now humming between our nervous systems. It felt like a second heartbeat in his wrist. He could feel my frustration like it was his own headache. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice low. "This bond is like a broadcast beacon. Every time your heart rate spikes, I feel it. Every time I get angry, you probably taste metal. Any tracker in the city could follow it." Elias crossed his arms. "So what's the plan? We split up?" I finally looked up at him, my eyes hard. "It would be safer for you. I'm the one they want. You were just a mistake I made along the way." He immediately pushed off the junk pile and crouched down in front of me, meeting my gaze. "Don't you dare rewrite history, Nara," he said firmly. "I was there. I saw you make a choice, not a mistake." I looked away, staring at a puddle of oil. "You don't get it. For the Night Wardens, what we have is a crime. They taught us that connection is a weakness, a blind spot where our loyalty to the state is supposed to be. They punished me for shielding that child because they said I allowed my biofield to imprint on a chaotic element. They punished me for being human. You are not a weapon," Elias said softly, seeing the cracks in my armor. "And you're not a malfunction." He reached out and covered my hand with his. A jolt of warmth shot up my arm. "I came here for a story," he admitted. "I saw you and I saw a headline, 'The Rogue Warden.' But I can't write that story anymore. Because you're not a headline, you're real. And I'm not leaving you to fix this alone." I looked down at his hand on mine, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. The bond between us shifted from a warning siren to a low, steady hum of comfort. "You're stubborn," I said, a tiny smile touching my lips. "I'm relentless," he corrected. "It's my best quality." Just then, a loud screech echoed through the junkyard. We both jumped into a combat stance, but the sound wasn't a threat. A small maintenance drone zipped around the corner, projecting a familiar face. "Kiri." "Took you long enough," she said, her holographic image grinning. "I've found a place for us, a place with others like you." We followed her to a hidden outpost, filled with other defectors and rebels. I looked at Elias, our hands still linked, and realized the truth. The regime was wrong. Connection isn't a weakness. It's a superpower. And our war was just beginning. A horrible squeal echoed out from a nearby alley, followed by a small drone that looked like it was hammered together from scrap. It was shaped like a trash can lid with one blinking red eye, and it was the source of the awful noise. Kiri, the four-armed Tarlaxian hacker, followed right behind it, looking completely fed up. "Shut it down!" she yelled at the drone, smacking the machine with one of her lower hands. The squealing died, replaced by a sad little whimper. "Found you," Kiri said, stepping around a puddle. "You two are not exactly hard to find. You're practically screaming on the emotional spectrum. It's disgusting." Elias just stared at the drone. "What is that thing?" Kiri gave the machine a pat. "This is a jammer. I built it myself from a toaster and a sonic grenade. It's supposed to scramble the bond frequency so Rune can't track you," she explained. "It also screams when it gets lonely. I think it might be the saddest robot I've ever met." Naira actually let out a snort. It was a tiny, graceless sound that somehow made her look 10 years younger. Kiri's expression softened as she looked at Naira. "You look awful, Voss." "I feel awful," Naira admitted, letting the shard of metal fall from her hand. What's the situation with the city lockdown? Kiri's tone turned serious. Martial law. Rune is telling everyone the Gala attack was a terrorist plot by off-world radicals. That means you, Elias. And he's claiming you, Nara, were kidnapped and brainwashed. They're painting you as a tragic victim, so they don't have to admit their best hunter turned on them. And Salith? Nara asked. The princess? Kiri hooked a thumb over her shoulder towards a crumbling building that was a strange mix of a cathedral and a warehouse. The sign flickering above the door said, Temple of the Binary Dawn. She's in there, Kiri said, and she has a lot she wants to tell you. The inside of the neon temple was lit by thousands of flickering blue candles and holographic saints that phased in and out of view. In the middle of it all, sitting on a crate of relief supplies, was Princess Salith. The heavy gold ceremonial robes were gone, replaced by simple scavenger clothes, a gray tunic and pants that were way too big for her small frame. Her arm was in a sling, and a bandage was taped across her forehead. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were sharp and clear, even if they were haunted. Your Highness, Nara said, instinctively bowing her head. Salith looked up. Don't bow, Warden. I'm the one who should be kneeling to you. You saved my life. She waved them closer. I saw the broadcast, Salith said. The leak you pushed into the Gala's systems. It was only a fraction of the data, but it was enough to rattle the Senate. Von Saul is furious. Where's Varen? Elias asked. Safe in the bunker under the palace, Salith answered, along with Rune. They're running the government from underground. They've declared a state of eternal vigilance. It's a coup, Nara said. No, Salith corrected her. It's the endgame. The princess got to her feet, wincing as she moved her injured arm. You wanted to know why they're doing this, why they would slaughter their own people. It isn't just about power. It's about fear. The ruling coalition has access to secret data, projections that show the empire is on the brink of economic collapse. Resources are running out. Multiple systems are about to revolt. They think the only way to stop society from breaking apart is to scare the population into absolute obedience. They're creating a monster so they can play the hero, Elias said, his lip curling in disgust. Exactly, Salith confirmed. If the night is random, people pray. But if the night is a weapon, people obey the hand that wields it. They plan to use Eclipse Latch to target any district that shows the slightest hint of dissent. They'll wipe out the opposition, city by city, until only the loyal are left, Salith finished. Nara's hands balled into tight fists. We destroyed the vault. We broke the darkness engine. You broke one engine, Salith said softly. That was just a local generator. The real source, the satellite array that controls the entire global atmospheric shield, is in orbit. She pointed to a map projected on a dusty table. There's an orbital relay station, the Apex Link. It handles the master synchronization for the whole planet's grid. If you can get to it, you can manually override the blackout protocols. You could lock Rune out of the system for good. How are we supposed to get there? Naira asked. The spaceports are on total lockdown. There's another way, Salith said. The royal route. She traced a line on the map that plunged deep underground, below the sewers and the city's old foundations, leading to a forgotten launch silo out in the Badlands. My ancestors built it during the First War, Salith explained. A private escape route just for the royal family. It hasn't been used in 200 years. The tunnels are probably unstable and the defenses are ancient. They're keyed to biometrics. My DNA isn't royal, Nara pointed out. No, Salith said. The old tech doesn't read DNA. It reads intent. It reads synchronization. The architects believed that a divided heart could not lead. The doors will only open for two biosignatures that are in perfect harmonic resonance. She looked from Naira to Elias. You two are the only ones who can open the way. Elias glanced at Naira. The bond, he breathed. It's a key, Naira realized. We need to move now, Salith urged. The next citywide night has been moved up. Rune isn't waiting. He's planning to drop the shield over the entire hemisphere in 6 hours to force you out. 6 hours? Elias said. That's impossible. We have bikes, Kiri interrupted. Everyone turned to look at her. What? Kiri said, shrugging her upper shoulders. I lifted 3 grav cycles from a police impound lot while you all were talking. Parked them out back. They're fast. They're loud, and one of them kind of smells like onions, but they fly. The trip to the Badlands was a dizzying rush of wind and pure adrenaline. They tore through the maze of the scrapyards on the grav cycles, dodging mountains of twisted metal and canyons of garbage. Nera flew in the lead, her body low over the bike, steering with a scary kind of precision. Elias was right behind her, his knuckles white on the handlebars, desperately trying to keep her taillights in sight. Kiri brought up the rear with Salith riding behind her, the sad little jammerbot strapped to her back, squealing every now and then into the wind. Soon they left the city behind and shot out into the Badlands, a desolate wasteland of rock and ancient ruins. The entrance to the royal route was a huge circular gate set into the side of a cliff, almost completely hidden by vines and moss. It looks like a mouth, Elias shouted over the whine of the engines. Nera hopped off her bike and walked to the gate's center. There was no keypad, just a smooth, bowl-shaped indentation in the stone. Salith slid off Kiri's bike. This is it. Put your hands on the stone, both of you. Naira and Elias stood in front of the massive door. Ready? Elias asked. Naira gave a single nod. She laid her hand flat against the stone. Elias placed his hand right on top of hers. For a moment, nothing happened. You have to sync, Salith called to them. It's not about touch, it's about rhythm. Naira closed her eyes. She tried to find that feeling from the vault, the one from the chute. She focused, searching for Elias's heartbeat. Thump, thump. It was fast, uneven. He was scared. Breathe, Elias, she whispered. I am breathing, he whispered back. I'm also standing in front of a giant magic door with an alien super soldier. It's a lot to take in. Nera shifted her hand, weaving her fingers through his. She pressed her palm flat against his, skin to skin, pulse to pulse. Focus on me, she said softly. Just me. Elias looked at her. He saw a smudge of dirt on her cheek, the way the faint light caught in her eyelashes. He stopped thinking about the mission, and for a second, he just thought about her. His heart rate slowed, falling into step with hers. The stone under their hands began to grow warm. A low humming sound vibrated up from the ground. Thin lines of blue light sparked to life on the door, spiraling out from their joined hands. With a deep groan of shifting earth, massive stone gears began to turn. The door split down the middle and slid open. Show-offs, Kiri grumbled. They ditched the bikes and went in on foot. The tunnels were enormous, cylindrical tubes lined with panels that glowed with a soft, breathing light. The air was stale and cold. As they moved deeper, the tunnel itself started to change. The gravity would flicker. One moment, their feet felt like lead. The next, they were almost floating, their boots barely touching the floor. It's the old generators, Salith said. They're failing. We have to hurry. They finally reached a central chamber, a huge spherical room with tunnels leading off in every direction. A suspended bridge rotated slowly in the center of the room. Without warning, all the lights in the tunnel flashed red. A high-pitched ping echoed all around them. Kiri scrambled to pull the jammer off her back. It was smoking. The jammer! Kiri yelled. It's fried! Nera spun around. The bond, opening the door, must have sent out a location ping. From the tunnel they'd just come from, a sleek black dropship screamed into view. It didn't bother to land. It just hovered there, its cannons locking onto them. Rune! Naira shouted. Run! They sprinted for the rotating bridge. The dropship opened fire, laser blasts scorching the metal floor right at their heels. Rune's voice boomed from the ship's speakers. "You can't outrun your own nature, Voss! You are a beacon!" The bridge shuddered violently. An explosion ripped through the tunnel, shredding the stabilizer gears. Gravity gave out completely. The entire room flipped. The floor became the ceiling became a wall. Elias, who had been running for the far exit, was thrown into the air. He tumbled through the zero gravity, drifting helplessly toward the dropship's massive intake fans. "Elias!" Nera screamed. She didn't go for a weapon. She lunged for the wall, slamming her magnetic boots, the only piece of armor she'd managed to salvage, onto the surface. Anchored to the new floor above the chaos, she reached down. "Elias, grab my hand!" He was slipping away from her, his fingertips just barely brushing against hers as he drifted into the void. But Nera refused to let him go. She didn't give a damn if their enemy, Run, saw what she was about to do. She didn't care if the entire galaxy was watching. Channeling every ounce of her desperate need into their connection, she sent a single thought down the bond. "Come back!" A crackling field of bioelectric energy flared from her hand, like a phantom grappling hook, snagging Elias's own energy field and yanking him across the zero-gravity vacuum. He slammed into her, his hand slapping into hers as she pulled him down to the solid surface beside her, his arms instinctively wrapping around her waist to anchor himself. He gasped. "Thanks for the lift." Nera wasn't smiling. She immediately started pulling him toward the exit hatch, where Kier and Salith were already clinging to a ladder. They had just scrambled through when the enemy ship fired a missile straight into the chamber. The resulting explosion sealed the tunnel behind them, burying the room under tons of rock. They all collapsed in a heap in the next corridor, where thankfully the gravity was stable. They were alive, but utterly trapped. "This is a dead end," Kiri said, her eyes glued to her data pad. "It leads to the sealed archives. The launch silo is on the other side of this." Salith pointed a shaky finger toward a massive, seamless wall of obsidian. "There's a door." It looked just like the first one they'd passed, but smaller, more personal. "This one requires a higher level of synchronization," Salith explained, her voice trembling. "The first door was just for entry," she continued. "This door leads to the inner sanctum. It demands total, perfect resonance." Nera stared at the door, but she could hear the scraping sounds of Run's forces already drilling through the rubble behind them. "We have minutes, maybe less," Nera said, turning to Elias. "We have to do it again." Elias just nodded, though the terror was plain on his face. They stepped up to the door and placed their hands flat against the cold surface. Absolutely nothing happened. "It isn't working," Elias said, his voice tight with panic. "It's not just about a heartbeat," Salith urged them. "It's the mind. You have to lower your walls. All of them." Nera looked at Elias, her heart sinking. She had spent her entire life building those walls. She was a fortress, designed to keep everyone out. Opening those gates meant letting him see absolutely everything. The fear, the shame, and the deep-seated belief that she was fundamentally unlovable. "I can't," she whispered. "If I let you in, you'll see what I really am. A weapon. A killer." But Elias just turned to her, ignoring the door completely, and took her face in his hands. "I see you, Nera. I've seen the real you since that first day on the roof. You are not a weapon. You're the person who saved me. You're the person who saves everyone." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I'm just a guy with a camera," he said, his voice cracking. "My whole life, I've just watched things happen to other people. I never got involved, and I never stayed. I was always the outsider. I am terrified," he admitted, "that if I stay, I'll just get you killed." He took a shaky breath. "But I'm not leaving. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you, not just to survive, but because I want to be with you." Nera stared into his eyes and felt the raw truth of his words resonating through their bond. This wasn't a tactical move. It was a vow. She closed her eyes and pictured the walls of her fortress crumbling, stone by stone. She let him feel her fear, and in return she let him feel her burgeoning hope. I choose you too, she thought, pushing the feeling out with every fiber of her being. The very air in the corridor shifted, growing heavy and charged with static. The obsidian door didn't just open, it dissolved into mist, reacting to the overwhelming power of their shared soul. They tumbled through the opening, stumbling into the chamber on the other side. It was an ancient transit station, and a sleek silver bullet train sat waiting on a magnetic rail, humming with dormant energy. "We made it!" Kiri shouted in relief. But just as they sprinted for the train, the rock wall they'd just come through exploded inward. Run burst through the cloud of dust, flanked by two of his elite shadow troopers. He didn't even aim at Nera. Instead, he fired a capture net at Salith. The weighted mesh wrapped around the princess, slamming her to the ground. "Salith!" Elias yelled, spinning back around. "Halt!" Run commanded, his voice echoing in the chamber. He held up a small detonator, and the net around Salith started beeping ominously. "One more step and she burns," Run warned. Nera and Elias froze in place. Run strode forward, yanking the struggling princess up by her collar. He looked at Nera with cold, calculating satisfaction. "Let's make a trade, Voss. I'm a reasonable man. Give me the human, and you can take the princess and go. I don't care about her, she's just a figurehead. But him, he's the catalyst. He's the real danger." Nera's eyes darted to Salith, who was shaking, her eyes wide with terror. "Do it," Salith whispered, pleading. "Save the city." Nera then looked at Elias. He glanced from the train to Salith, and then back to Nera, seeing the cold logic in Run's eyes. He knew Run was lying. If he surrendered, the madman would kill him and then kill Nera anyway. But maybe, just maybe, it would buy her the time she needed to get the train started. He took a step forward. "Okay." "No!" Nera shouted. Elias looked back at her. "Nera, it's the mission. You have to stop the knight. You can't do that if he kills the princess." "I am not trading lives," Nera snarled. She stormed over to Elias, grabbed the front of his jacket, and yanked him back forcefully. "You do not get to make my choices for me, Elias Kane. I'm not losing you." She then spun to face Run, her eyes glowing with the leftover energy from their bond. "You want a catalyst?" she asked. "Here's one." She didn't attack Run. Instead, she snatched the sparking, smoking robot jammer from Kiri's hands and hurled it directly at the train's magnetic rail. The device hit the third rail and shorted out in a massive, blinding flash of electricity that sent a power surge through the room's entire system. The lights exploded. The gravity stabilizers failed once again, and for a heart-stopping second, everyone was floating and weightless. Nera didn't waste a moment. She grabbed Elias and Kiri, kicked off a wall, and launched them all toward the train's open door. Run, caught completely by surprise, lost his grip on the detonator as he drifted helplessly upward. Salith, still tangled in the net, floated toward the ceiling of the tunnel. "Nera!" Salith screamed. "Go, get the codes!" Nera reached for her, but the gap was too wide. Just then, the emergency gravity slammed back on, and they all crashed down inside the train car. Nera scrambled to the controls and hit the manual override. As the doors hissed shut, she saw Run land on his feet, grab Salith's net, and drag her back into the darkness. The train's engines roared to life, supercharged by the power surge, and rocketed forward into the launch tube. Nera pressed her face against the window, watching in devastation as Salith vanished from sight. "We lost her," she whispered, her voice breaking. But Elias pulled her away from the window, his face grim as he gripped her shoulders. "We didn't lose her," he said fiercely. "We just raised the stakes." He pulled out the access code Salith had given them. "We're going to that station. We are going to take down the knight, and then we are coming back for her." The train accelerated, pressing them hard into the floor as it carried them upward toward the stars and their final battle. The connection between them was no longer a gentle hum. It was a roar. Their stolen skiff was an old orbital debris hauler that smelled violently of burnt hydraulic fluid and unwashed cargo netting. It shuddered and groaned as it clawed its way into the upper atmosphere, the metal hull complaining under the stress of a climb it was never built for. In the cramped cockpit, Kiri was piloting with all four of her hands, her fingers a blur across a dashboard that looked like it was held together with tape. "Stop touching that!" Kiri screeched, slapping Elias's hand away from a blinking blue switch. "I was trying to stabilize the yaw!" Elias yelled back, clinging to the co-pilot's chair as the ship bucked like a rodeo bull. "The display says we're drifting 4 degrees to port." "That's the cargo release, you hairless ape!" Kiri shrieked, her voice pitching up in genuine offense. "If you press that, we drop our engine core and become a very expensive meteor. Just sit on your hands." Elias held up his hands in surrender. "I'm helping. This is me helping." "You're helping me develop an ulcer," Kiri muttered, banking the ship hard to the right. Nara sat quietly in the jump seat behind them, checking her weapons. Her gaze was locked on the view screen, watching as the curve of the planet fell away below them, a beautiful marble of swirling clouds and bruised violet light. And then she saw it, hanging in the black emptiness of space like a spider in a web of stars. The apex link. It was a colossal structure, a ring of gleaming silver metal rotating slowly around a central spire. But it wasn't the station that sent a chill down Nara's spine. It was the 6 colossal towers attached to it, hooked into its power grid like giant leeches, funneling a substance that looked like liquid ink, pure, concentrated night energy. "Look at them," Nara whispered, horrified. "Darkness siphons." Elias looked up, his earlier humor completely gone. "They're harvesting it." "It's not just a weapon," Nara said, her voice hollow with realization. "It's fuel. They create the terror on the surface, harvest the fear energy it generates, and use that to power the very station that controls the shield. It's a closed loop. They've turned fear into a renewable resource." A wave of nausea washed over her. Her whole life, she'd believed the Night Wardens were the brave heroes standing between civilization and chaos. But now she saw the horrifying truth. They weren't guardians. They were just ranch hands, herding the population into a slaughterhouse to keep the lights on for the elites. "We're approaching the maintenance sector," Kiri announced, her tone all business now. "All right, I'm matching the station's spin. Hold on, this is going to be bumpy," Kiri announced. "And Elias, if you throw up on my console, I swear I'm ejecting you." Elias, looking a little green around the gills, shot back, "I've got a stomach of steel." Kiri just smirked and slammed the thrusters forward. The ship screamed, a violent shudder of metal on metal as she forced the docking clamps onto a rusted old service airlock. A deafening clang echoed through the cabin, followed by the soft hiss of the pressure equalizing. "We're in," Kiri sighed, slumping into her seat. "I'll stay here, keep the engines warm, and try to hack their internal sensors so they never see you coming." Elias looked surprised. "You're staying?" "Someone's got to be the getaway driver," Kiri quipped. "Besides, I'm allergic to getting shot at. Now go on, save your princess. Just try not to get killed." Naira stood and put a hand on Kiri's shoulder. "Thank you, Kiri." Kiri waved it off, but the rapid blinking of her lower eyelids gave away her true feelings. "Just get your butt back here, Voss, or I'm billing your ghost for the fuel." Naira and Elias made their way to the airlock. As the inner hatch hissed open, they stepped into the belly of the beast. The inside of the Apex Link wasn't the cold, sterile military base Naira had pictured. It was alive. The walls were covered in glowing, bioluminescent panels that pulsed with a slow, organic rhythm. The floor was a soft, synthetic mesh that seemed to gently grip the soles of their boots. The air hung warm and heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and something strangely sweet, like decaying flowers. "Be careful. It reacts to neurochemistry," Naira warned in a low voice. "This station uses psionic conducive tech to channel the night energy." It can literally read your emotions. As if on cue, the lights in the hallway flared a harsh, anxious yellow, mirroring her own tension. "Great," Elias whispered. "So if we get scared, the hallway knows about it." "If we get scared, the security system knows," Naira corrected him. "We have to stay in control. Keep your heart rate steady. Keep your mind blank." "That's a tall order," Elias muttered, "seeing as we're walking straight into a trap." They pushed deeper into the station, sticking to the service corridors, the bond between them humming like a live wire in this strange environment. The station's unique design was amplifying it. Naira could feel Elias in her mind, not as a gentle presence, but as a roaring fire. She felt his anxiety, his fierce determination, and that constant, unwavering focus he had on her. It was distracting, and it was intoxicating. They finally reached a junction near the central spire, but a massive blast door blocked their way. As Naira knelt to hack the control panel, her fingers flying across the surface, Elias stood guard, his eyes scanning the corridor. He glanced back at her, at the way the muscles in her neck were knotted with stress. "Naira," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Almost there." "If we actually pull this off," Elias continued, "if we stop the broadcast, save Salith, and somehow get off this station without being vaporized, what happens then?" Naira's hand stopped. The panel chirped, flashing a permissive green, but she didn't move to open the door. She just stayed there, kneeling. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm serious," he insisted. "You're a fugitive. I'm a wanted man. It's not like we can just go back to our old apartments." Naira slowly stood up and turned to face him. The corridor lights shifted with her mood, bathing them in a deep, melancholy blue. She just looked at him, this human who had crashed into her life and torn down all her walls with nothing more than bad jokes and sheer, stubborn kindness. "I want to stop running," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "I want to wake up somewhere the sky isn't always turning black. I want—" She took a step closer, and the bond between them flared, sending a shiver through them both. "I want a life where I don't have to fight to earn the right to be loved," she whispered. "Where I don't have to be a weapon or a shield. I just want to be." Elias's stoic expression completely shattered. He reached out, his hands gently cupping her face as his thumbs brushed away a smudge of grease from her cheek. "You have that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have that right now." He pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a desperate, frantic kiss like before. This was slow, deliberate, and certain. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, and she buried her face in his chest, her hands gripping the fabric of his jacket as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. They held on to each other with a force that felt like it could crack ribs, and the station around them seemed to respond. The lights shifted from blue to a warm, pulsing gold. The very air seemed to hum with a gentle, harmonic frequency. For just one perfect moment, they weren't fugitives or soldiers. They were just two scared people finding an anchor in an endless void. Naira breathed him in, memorizing the familiar scent of rain and leather that always clung to him. The smell of home. She locked the memory away in the safest part of her heart. Pulling back slightly, her hand still resting on his arms, she said, her voice firm once more, "We finish this first." Elias nodded, his eyes shining. "First, we save the world," he agreed with a small smile. "Then we figure out breakfast." Naira slapped the door release, and the heavy blast door slid open. The ceremonial chamber was a vast, circular amphitheater at the very peak of the station's spire. One entire wall was a transparent window, looking down on the sprawling planet below. The other walls were lined with banks of humming machinery and tiers of empty seats. In the very center of the room, on a raised platform, was a device that looked like a throne made of silver needles. and Princess Salith was strapped into it. She was unconscious, her head slumped forward. Thick cable snaked from her ceremonial suit, jacking her nervous system directly into the station's mainframe. Standing over her were the masterminds, Senator Veyron Saul and Commander Roan. Veyron, dressed in pristine white robes, was looking over a datapad. Run stood beside him in full combat armor, his helmet off, looking completely bored. A swarm of drone cameras floated around them, their little red recording lights blinking ominously. "We go live in 2 minutes," Veyron announced, his voice echoing in the massive chamber. "Is the script loaded?" Run glanced at a nearby monitor. "The script is ready. The princess will confess that her weakness allowed the Knight to breach the lower districts. She'll beg the Senate to enact the purity protocol. Then I'll heroically activate the defense grid, saving the city while we conveniently purge the slums." "And the energy harvest?" Veyron asked. Run gave a chilling smirk. "The spike of pure terror from the lower districts will be enough to power the grid for a decade. It's efficient." Hiding behind a bank of servers, Naira and Elias exchanged horrified looks. "They're using her as a living trigger," Naira hissed. "When that broadcast starts, they'll force a power surge through her nervous system to drop the city's shield. It'll completely fry her brain." "We have to cut the feed," Elias whispered urgently. Naira tapped her earpiece. "Kiri, are you seeing this?" "I see them," Kiri's voice crackled back. "I'm trying to hijack their broadcast signal, but Veyron's using military-grade encryption. I need a physical connection to the central node to break through." "Where's the node?" Naira asked. "Right under the platform the princess is on," Kiri replied. Naira peered out at the open room. There was no cover, no place to hide. "I'll draw their fire," Naira said, her mind made up. "You get to the node." Elias grabbed her arm. "That's suicide. Run is an elite-class soldier." "I'm better," Naira stated flatly. Before he could argue, she stood up and stepped out from behind the servers. She didn't sneak. She walked right into the center of the room, the sound of her boots echoing on the metal floor. The golden light, the station's reaction to her bond with Elias, still clung to her like a faint halo. The cameras swiveled to face her. "Veyron Saul!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the silence. Veyron spun around, his polished politician smile instantly vanishing. Run's hand dropped to his sidearm. "Officer Voss," Veyron said, quickly recovering his composure for the cameras. "Citizens, look! The traitor has returned to finish her crime." Naira just kept walking toward him. "I'm no traitor," she declared, "and I didn't come alone." She held up the master cipher key they had stolen from the gala. "This is the proof for Project Eclipse," she announced, staring directly into the lens of the nearest camera drone. "The Knight isn't a natural disaster. It's a weapon, and these 2 men are the ones holding the trigger." Run let out a roar of fury. "Cut the feed! Kill her!" At his command, security doors slammed open and a dozen guards in black armor stormed into the room. "Now, Elias!" Naira shouted. Igniting her energy baton, she charged. The room exploded into chaos. Run opened fire with his pulse rifle, sending searing bolts of red energy across the floor. Naira slid under the barrage, popping up in a graceful arc to slam her baton into a guard's throat. Elias bolted from cover, keeping low to the ground. He was no soldier, but he was quick on his feet. He slid across the polished floor, heading straight for the maintenance panel beneath the throne. A guard spotted him. "Target the human!" Elias scrambled, fumbling at his belt and pulling out a magnetic grapple gun he'd swiped from the skiff. He fired it wildly over his shoulder. The magnetic hook soared through the air and latched right onto the station's gravity controls on the far wall. "Oops," Elias muttered. He reflexively yanked the cord, the switch flipped, and the artificial gravity in the entire chamber vanished. Everyone and everything lifted off the floor. Veyron let out a very undignified squeal as he drifted helplessly toward the ceiling. The heavily armored guards began to flail, spinning uselessly in the air. But Naira didn't flail. She had trained in 0G. Kicking off a floating console, She launched herself like a torpedo straight at Run. They crashed into each other in midair, a brutal, silent ballet of violence. Run struggled to aim his rifle, but Naira grabbed the barrel and twisted it away. Using his own momentum against him, she spun them both around and slammed him hard against a wall. Meanwhile, Elias had activated his magnetic boots. While everyone else floated aimlessly, he calmly walked along the floor, which was now just another wall. He reached the node and jammed Kiri's data spike into the port. "Kiri, you're in!" he yelled. "I've got it!" Kiri's triumphant voice screamed in his ear. "And I'm broadcasting. The truth is going out on every screen in the city. Billboards, wrist comms, you name it. They're seeing everything." The broadcast feed flickered. Veyron's carefully rehearsed speech vanished, replaced by the raw, unfiltered truth of the conspiracy. Audio logs began to play. Maps detailing the harvest zones lit up the chamber. Vaughn watched the monitors, his face a mask of horror. "No!" he shrieked, flailing uselessly in the zero gravity. "Stop it!" Run shoved Naira away, using the wall to steady himself. He saw the truth splashed across the screens, and his face twisted into a mask of pure, cold rage. "If we can't rule this city," he snarled, "then we'll break it." He reached for his belt, pulling out a remote detonator. He didn't point it at the city. He aimed for the siphons on the station's exterior. He slammed the button. A deep, thunderous boom rocked the entire station. The darkness siphons on the outer hull didn't just switch off. They reversed their polarity. The containment field shattered, releasing the massive, stored reserves of concentrated night energy. But the energy didn't plummet to the planet below. Instead, the vacuum from the breach sucked it all back inside. A web of cracks spread across the chamber's transparent wall. "Nera!" Elias yelled, looking up from the node. The glass exploded inward. The night itself poured in. This wasn't like the shadows they'd fought in the ballroom. This was the source, a tidal wave of absolute zero. It flooded the room in an instant, freezing the air and turning the floating guards into statues of ice and ash. The gravity stabilizers failed again, and with a sickening lurch, everyone dropped to the floor. Elias crashed hard onto the deck. He scrambled backward as the tide of pure darkness surged toward him. Nera landed gracefully in a crouch near the dais. She saw the blackness swallowing the room whole. She saw Salith still helpless in the chair, the dark tide already licking at her boots. "We can't fight this!" Elias yelled, his voice tight with panic. "It's too much!" Nera looked at him, saw the raw terror in his eyes, and felt it echo in her own heart. But beneath the fear, she felt their bond. A thin, golden thread holding strong against the encroaching void. "We don't fight it," she said, her voice steady. "We push it back." She held out her hand. "Elias." He saw her, and in that moment he understood completely. He sprinted toward her. He didn't even notice the shadows clawing at his ankles. He launched himself up the steps of the dais, and Nera caught him. "If you want to live through this," she screamed over the roar, "hold on to me!" They slammed into each other, and this time there was no hesitation, no awkwardness. They locked themselves together, chest to chest, forehead pressed against forehead. Nera wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in the curve of his neck. Elias clutched her so tightly his fingers bruised her skin. They didn't just sync their heartbeats. They threw open the floodgates. Nera poured every piece of herself into their connection, her years of crushing loneliness, her burning rage at Rune, her fragile, desperate hope for a real future. Elias met her with his unwavering love, his stubborn faith in her, and his refusal to stand by and watch her fall. Their shared power didn't just bloom, it detonated. A shockwave of solid, blinding light erupted from their bodies. It was a physical force that slammed into the incoming tide of darkness and shattered it. The shadows shrieked as they were burned away to nothing. The light expanded, filling the entire chamber, shoving the night back out through the shattered window. Inside their bubble of pure light, Everything was silent. Elias held her steady, his hands firm on her back, even as reality itself seemed to warp and tear just outside their shield. "Stay with me," he whispered against her skin. "Always," she breathed back. They began to move toward the throne, and their bubble of light moved with them. Nera reached out with one hand, the other still locked with Elias. She tore the cables from Salith's suit. The princess gasped, her eyes flying open to see the impossible light. She saw Nera and Elias fused together and glowing like a twin star. The connection to the mainframe was gone. Salith slumped forward, and Elias caught her with his free arm, pulling her into their shield. The broadcast was somehow still running. Kiri was still transmitting their every move. Salith spotted the camera drone, miraculously safe inside their light. She grabbed the microphone attached to the dais. "People of Kaidam," she yelled, her voice raw and powerful. Across the city, millions watched as their princess, bruised and battered, was held up by a glowing night warden and a human. "There is no natural night!" Salith cried. "It's all a lie. Rune and Veyron are feeding you to the dark just to hold on to their power. I am Princess Salith, and I order you to tear down the siphons. Rise up!" Rune, who had been hiding behind a shielded console, roared with fury and jumped to his feet. He'd lost his rifle, so he pulled out a wicked, serrated combat knife instead. He didn't care about the darkness. He didn't care about their shield. He charged right through the edge of the light, his armor smoking and sizzling as their power burned him. "Die!" he screamed, lunging directly for Salith. Nera saw him coming. She couldn't use a weapon. Her hands were maintaining the shield. She couldn't move Elias or the princess in time. She made the only choice she could. Twisting her body, she broke the perfect symmetry of their embrace, just enough to turn. She put herself between the knife and the princess. The blade sank deep, finding the gap in her ruined armor and plunging into her side. Nera gasped, her entire body seizing up. The lattice flickered, the light around them dimming to a dangerous glow. "No!" Elias screamed. He didn't let go of her. With his free hand, he grabbed Rune's wrist, adrenaline giving him impossible strength. He twisted the commander's arm until he heard the bone snap. Rune howled and dropped the knife. Elias drove a savage, desperate kick into his chest, sending him stumbling backward and out of their circle of light. The darkness waiting just beyond their shield surged forward. It enveloped Rune completely. He didn't even have time to scream as the shadows swarmed him, dissolving his armor, his flesh, and his very existence into nothing. Nera sagged in Elias's arms, the light fading fast. The wound was critical. "Nera," Elias choked out. "Stay with me. Don't you dare fade." Nera looked up at him, her silver eyes growing hazy. "The lattice is destabilizing." "We're leaving!" Elias shouted. He grabbed Salith's arm. "Help me! Together!" They managed to haul Nera to her feet. The entire station was groaning around them as its structural integrity failed, the darkness chewing through the walls. "Kiri!" Elias yelled into his earpiece. "We're coming out. I'm at the breach." Kiri's voice crackled back. "The whole station is coming apart. You have 30 seconds." Elias swept Nera into his arms. She was a dead weight, her blood soaking his borrowed suit. He ran. He sprinted through the collapsing hallway, dodging falling chunks of metal. Salith ran alongside him, using a discarded blaster to shoot open the locked doors. "Left!" Kiri screamed in his ear. "Go left, now! Jump!" They reached the airlock. The skiff was there, its engine screaming. They hurled themselves inside. Kiri didn't even wait for the hatch to seal. She slammed the thrusters. The skiff shot away from the station like a cannonball. Behind them, the apex link groaned one last time. The central spire cracked. The harvested night energy within ignited. and the station exploded in a silent, blinding flower of black and violet fire. Elias didn't watch it go. He was on the floor of the skiff, holding Nera. She was terrifyingly pale, her breathing shallow and weak. Their bond was a faint, dying whisper in his mind. "Nera," he whispered, pressing his hand against the wound. "You promised. You said we'd figure out breakfast." Nera's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him, and a faint, bloody smile touched her lips. "I like pancakes," she whispered. Then her eyes closed, and the bond went silent. Elias screamed her name, but the only response was the hum of the engines carrying them back toward a world that was on fire. The stolen skiff slammed into the atmosphere of the lower district like a rock skipping on a pond, trailing a long black ribbon of smoke from its starboard engine. Kiri wrestled with the controls, using all four of her hands and cursing in 3 different languages as the capital city's skyline rushed up to meet them. "Brace for impact!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. "And by brace, I mean find something soft and pray to whatever god is in charge of aerodynamics!" They crashed into a reclamation yard near the river, skidding through mountains of scrap metal and old ship hulls before coming to a screeching, sparking halt against the shell of an ancient transport hauler. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the distant, terrifying wail of sirens. Elias unbuckled his harness with trembling hands. He ignored the throbbing bruise on his forehead and scrambled to the back of the cockpit, where Nera lay motionless in a jump seat. Her face was the color of ash, and the vibrant violet markings on her skin had faded to a dull, lifeless gray. The wound in her side, where Rune's knife had found its mark, was cauterized, but looked terrifyingly deep. Her breathing was barely there. "Nera," Elias whispered, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch. She opened her eyes. They were hazy, the silver irises clouded over. The bond between them, usually a humming current of connection, now felt like faint static, a lost signal in a raging storm. The lattice had been pushed far beyond its limits, running on pure adrenaline and terror, and now her entire nervous system was shutting down. "We're not done," Nera rasped, trying to push herself up. She winced, sucking in a sharp breath that sounded like tearing paper. "You're done," Elias said, gently pressing her back down. "You lost too much blood. The station is gone. The broadcast worked. We won." "We didn't win," Salith said from the hatch. The princess stood silhouetted in the opening, staring out at the city. The sky above the capital wasn't clearing. It was boiling. Destroying the orbital station hadn't stopped the night. It had broken the dam. All the failsafes were gone. Vaughn, trapped and desperate in his bunker beneath the palace, had unleashed the final protocol. It was his last act of punishment. The Senate had one rule: if they couldn't control the kingdom, they would burn it all to ash. Peering out the hatch with Salith, Elias could see they were keeping their word. It was an apocalypse. The shimmering fake aurora was gone, swallowed by a swirling storm of black clouds that hung over the city like a slab of lead. Down below, the shadows weren't just hunting anymore, they were swarming. A tide of darkness was washing over entire blocks, wiping out pockets of resistance. But the people were fighting. Spurred on by Salith's broadcast, they flooded the streets with makeshift torches, flares, and hastily wired floodlights, forming chains of light to push back the dark. It was beautiful, brave, and they were losing. "They're all going to die," Elias said, his voice strained. "Every last one of them." "Not if we get to the heart grid," Salith countered. The scared girl was gone. Her voice was pure steel now. "It's the central core, deep under the palace, the main line for the planet's atmosphere. If we can get to it, we can rewrite the night protocols ourselves. and shut this down for good. Kiri kicked open a stuck panel and grabbed a medkit. The heart grid? That's a myth. It's supposed to be some ancient terraforming engine. It's real, Salith insisted, and it's the only thing strong enough to override Veyron's command. Leaning hard against the wall, Naira struggled to get up. Then let's go! Elias turned to her, alarmed. You can barely stand. You can't fight your way through a city full of shadows. I don't have to fight, Naira said, her voice a thin wire. I just have to walk. He moved to block her, his protective instinct screaming louder than logic. He put his hands on her shoulders. Naira, please, look at yourself. You're falling apart. I won't watch you die. Naira looked up at him, and for a second their bond flared with sharp, raw frustration. She grabbed his wrists. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were like steel. Listen to me, Elias Kane. She pulled herself closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. You want to save me. I feel it. It's like a warm, suffocating blanket over my mind. But love isn't locking someone in a box so they can't get hurt. That's just possession. It's what the Senate is doing to this whole city. She paused, fighting a wave of pain. Love isn't about one person sacrificing everything to keep the other one safe. It's about choosing to stand next to them in the fire. It's choosing us, even if it breaks us. Elias just stared, the truth of her words cutting through the static in his head. He'd been trying to be her hero, her shield, when all she ever needed was a partner. He let out a long, shaky breath and finally nodded. Okay, he said, his voice thick. We walk into the fire. Together, they moved like ghosts through the city. Salith used her royal codes to get them past the last few automated defenses, while Kiri worked her magic, jamming the signals of the hunter-killer drones overhead. The streets were a war zone. They saw wardens who had heard the broadcast and switched sides, fighting alongside civilians, their energy shields blazing against the darkness. They saw the shadow swarms rip through barricades, driven by a chaotic, mindless hunger. Finally, they made it to a service entrance for the palace catacombs, a huge blast door hidden behind a fancy fountain in the main plaza. Salith typed in the code. The door hissed, but stayed shut. Veyron has the sublevels on total lockdown, Salith said, a hint of panic in her voice. Kiri cracked her knuckles. All 20 of them. Move aside, Your Highness. Let a professional take a look. She plugged her datapad into the control panel. Wow, this encryption is ancient. It's almost like they wanted someone to break in. The heavy door groaned and slid open. Naira finished grimly. They're inviting us in. They headed down into the darkness. The deeper they went, the more the architecture changed. The cold, sterile metal of the Senate levels gave way to something far older. Stone walls fused with circuits that glowed like amber, humming with a soft, biological rhythm. This was the city's true foundation, built by the planet's first settlers thousands of years ago. At the end of a long bridge hanging over a chasm of pure energy was the heart grid chamber. They stopped at the entrance, a massive archway shimmering with a containment field. This is it, Salith said. The core is inside, but the interface, it was made for the builders. Their bodies were different. They had dual-chambered minds. She looked between Naira and Elias. A single mind can't handle that much data. It would burn out your brain in seconds. To rewrite the protocol, you need two minds working in perfect sync. A bonded pair. Naira stared at the shimmering archway. And the risk? Neural overload, Salith admitted quietly. Permanent imprinting. You might not be able to separate your minds again. You could lose track of where one of you ends and the other begins. Elias took Naira's hand, and the static between them settled into a steady, calm heartbeat. I've been lost before, Elias said. I wouldn't mind being lost with you. Kiri sniffled, wiping at her lower set of eyes. You two are ridiculously dramatic. If you die in there, I'm sending your ghosts the bill for the skiff repairs." A real, though weak, smile touched Naira's lips. "Put it on my tab," she said. She looked at Elias. She didn't have to ask. Together they walked through the shimmering field. The chamber of the heart grid was like a cathedral made of light and shadow. The room was a massive sphere, big enough to hold a battleship. Floating in the center was the core, a crystal structure the size of a house, pulsing with a soft green light. But wrapped around it, choking it, were thick black cables and machinery grafted onto the crystal, like tumors. This was the Senate's work, the corruption that had twisted a terraforming engine into a weapon of torture. The air felt thick, heavy with the memory of a planet that remembered being green. And in that instant, Naira understood the truth. The night wasn't originally a weapon. It was a sleep cycle. The builders used it to let the world rest, a programmed period of darkness and renewal to heal the ecosystem. The Senate had taken a tool for healing and made it a knife. "Welcome home, Officer Voss." The voice echoed from the shadows under the core. A figure stepped into the light. It was Rune. But he wasn't the man they'd fought before. He was a wreck. Half of his face was a melted scar, his flesh fused with what was left of his helmet. His armor was shattered, showing skin crawling with pulsing black veins. He hadn't just survived his fall into the darkness, he had swallowed it. Or it had swallowed him. The very energy he commanded was the only thing holding him together. "Commander?" Naira said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're not looking so good." "I've never seen more clearly," Rune rasped, limping toward them and trailing wisps of shadow. "You really think you can stop this? You think one little broadcast and a few riots can change how power works?" He waved a hand toward the core. "Civilization is a delicate thing, Voss. It needs fear to keep its shape. Without the night, without a threat, these people will tear each other to pieces. I am the only thing keeping this empire from falling into chaos." "That's not peace," Naira shot back, stepping between him and the others. "That's a slow-motion execution. You're not saving the city, you're just managing a graveyard." Rune let out a laugh that sounded like grinding rocks. "Then let's bury it together." He raised his hand and the shadows in the room surged, forming sharp lances of pure darkness. Salith stepped forward, raising a pulse pistol she'd grabbed from the skiff. "No," Rune glared at the princess. "You're just a child playing with fire." "I am the queen," Salith declared, "and I'm relieving you of your command." She fired. The energy bolt slammed into Rune's chest, but the shadows just swallowed it. He didn't even blink. With a flick of his wrist, a wave of force threw Salith and Kiri back, pinning them to the far wall. His attention snapped back to Naira and Elias. "Go on, connect to the grid," Rune sneered. "Let's see if your little romance is strong enough to hold back the tide." He was daring them, certain they would burn out. Naira glanced at Elias. "Now," she whispered. They dashed for the interface console at the base of the core. Rune just watched them, smug as a god. Naira put her hands on the panel. Elias covered her hands with his. They locked eyes one last time. "I'm terrified," Elias admitted, his voice shaking. "I know," Naira said softly. "I'm right here. Just you. Just me." "What do you want, Naira?" he asked, his voice cracking, echoing her question from the station. "I want you," she said, her voice fierce. "Not as a hero, not as a way to survive. Just you." They closed their eyes and let the walls between their minds fall. The connection wasn't a stream, it was a tidal wave. Naira felt Elias's entire life hit her at once, his childhood on a world of endless rain, his loneliness in crowded rooms, the first time he saw her on that rooftop and thought she was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he'd ever seen. Elias felt her pain, the cold steel of her training, the lonely silence of the barracks, the deep, aching desire to be soft without ever being seen as weak. They became one. The room erupted in light. The heart grid recognized their dual signature. Their bond became the new code. The chaotic, hateful programming of the weaponized knight slammed into the stable, perfect harmony of their connection. Rune screamed as the light seared him, the shadows clinging to his body turning to smoke and disappearing. "No!" the creature roared, a monster made of smoke and pure hatred. "This is chaos! This is weakness!" It charged right at them. Nera and Elias were frozen. They were the circuit now. If they broke contact, the system rewrite would fail. The monster, Rune, raised a blade made of condensed shadow, aiming straight for Nera's exposed back. "I deny you!" Salith screamed. The princess, bruised and battered, launched herself from the wall. She didn't even try to fire her weapon. She just tackled Rune. It was a suicide play. She slammed into him, knocking him off balance right as he swung. The shadow blade missed Nera by an inch, sinking into the interface console instead. Sparks erupted. Rune whirled on Salith, his hand closing around her throat. "You ungrateful little—" But the impact had sent them both stumbling to the edge of the chasm, directly into the path of the collapsing energy field the grid was purging. The floor beneath them shattered. Salith clawed her way back, her fingers scraping against the stone. Rune tried to use his shadows to get a grip, but the blinding light pouring from Nera and Elias was too intense. It dissolved his power. He looked at Nera one last time, his eyes wide with the sudden understanding that he hadn't been defeated by weapons, but by something he could never comprehend. Then Rune fell. He plunged into the raw energy of the planet's core, his screams echoing as the light tore him apart. Salith dragged herself onto the ledge, gasping for breath. At the console, the process hit critical mass. Nera and Elias were glowing, their physical forms blurring into pure, radiant light. They were literally merging passion and peril. Their emotional connection was the new algorithm. The love they felt for each other was what stabilized the entire planet. A calm, ancient female voice echoed from the system. "Rewrite complete." The black, strangling cable around the planet's core crumbled into dust. The bruised violet light of the crystal flared into a brilliant, healing gold. Above ground, a miracle was unfolding. The swirling vortex of the final night didn't just disappear, it unraveled. Terrified citizens looked up as the oppressive darkness softened. The shadows that had been hunting them lost their form, drifting away like mist in the morning sun. The sky faded to a soft, twilight blue. A gentle rain started to fall. Not acid, not sorrow, but clean, warm rain. Across the city, biometric scanners that had been flashing red with warnings all turned green. The grid began its own repairs, knitting together cracked streets and sealing shattered windows. This was the true night, a time for healing. Back in the chamber, the light subsided. Nera and Elias collapsed in a tangle of limbs on the cold stone floor. They just lay there for a moment, breathing in the newfound silence. "Elias," Nera whispered. "Yeah," he croaked. "Are you? You?" Elias took a mental inventory. He could still feel her, a warm, permanent presence in the back of his mind, but he was still himself. "I think so," he said. "Are you you?" Nera closed her eyes, feeling the immense burden of her duty, the weight of the armor she'd worn for so long, finally lift. "I'm free," she breathed. The aftermath was messy, the way revolutions always are. Senator Veyron Saul was found in his bunker, frantically trying to shred paper documents. A squad of night wardens who had switched sides arrested him and dragged him into the plaza. The people didn't harm him. They just watched with pity as he was taken away. The Senate was dissolved. A provisional council was formed, with representatives from every district. Salith was chosen to lead it, not as a distant queen on a throne, but as a guide. Her very first act was to push through transparency reforms, making it illegal to manufacture fear, and opening the Night Warden archives to the public. Nera Voss had to face a military tribunal. Technically, she had committed treason, mutiny, and destroyed imperial property. The trial lasted all of an hour. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of 50,000 people had gathered. They were chanting her name. They held signs showing the glowing shield, the new symbol of their era. The judges looked at the evidence. They looked at the crowd. Then they looked at Nera, who stood before them unchained, her head held high. "Case dismissed," the High Magistrate ruled, slamming his gavel down. The second Naira appeared on the steps. The crowd roared like a single giant beast. She didn't wave. She just gave them a slow, deliberate nod, the silent acknowledgement of a warrior who had finally laid down her sword. 6 weeks later, you could feel the city healing. Scaffolding climbed over old wounds on the buildings, and the markets were a beautiful, chaotic mess of life. During the day, the sky was just blue, no longer choked with smoke. And at night, a peaceful twilight settled over the streets, a time for rest instead of terror. Elias was tucked away at a small outdoor cafe on the middle tier, nursing a cup of coffee that, for the first time in ages, actually tasted like coffee. His datapad sat on the table, open to the final chapter of his book. He'd decided to call it The Light We Keep. Just then, a shadow fell over his table. "Is this seat taken?" Elias looked up. It was Naira. But she wasn't in armor. She wore a simple jacket and pants, looking so normal it was breathtaking. The sunlight danced on the violet markings on her skin. "Depends," Elias said, leaning back in his chair. "Are you a spy?" Naira sat down, stealing a sip of his coffee and making a face. "Too bitter. And no, I'm unemployed." Elias grinned. "Funny, I heard the new council is looking for a chief of planetary safety. Said they needed someone with experience in crisis management and, ghost busting." "I turned it down," Naira said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Really? Why?" Nera looked out at the city. She watched a group of kids playing by a fountain, chasing a little holographic butterfly. They weren't checking the time. They weren't afraid. "Because I'm done with safety," she said. "Safety is just about surviving. I want to live." She turned back to him, the bond between them humming like a quiet, permanent song. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Besides," she said, her eyes dancing with mischief, "I've got a human to look after, one who has a bad habit of jumping off buildings and proposing marriage to mining companies." Elias laughed, a full, happy sound. "So," he said, "what do we do now?" Nera squeezed his hand. "We rebuild," she said. "We figure out who we are when we're not fighting for our lives. And we make damn sure no one ever has to be afraid of the dark again." Elias looked at her, and he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. He realized that survival wasn't just about making it through the night. It was about refusing to become the monster you escaped. It was about choosing a love that celebrated freedom every single day. He closed his datapad. "Sounds like a plan, Nera." "Sounds like a life, Elias." They sat there as the sun began to set, watching the gentle, healing twilight settle over the city they had saved. Together.